Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our council meeting for the day. Madam City Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Schwedhelm,
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer,
Here.
Councilmember Rogers,
Present.
Councilmember Fleming,
Here.
Vice Mayor Alvarez,
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Excellent. Let's go on to our statements of abstention from council members. Is there anyone who has to abstain from any of the items on today's council agenda? Seeing none, we'll keep moving. We have a number of consent items before we get to our main business for the day. Madam City Manager, do you want to introduce the items?
Good afternoon, Mayor Rogers and members of council. Consent item 3.1 is a resolution, extension of proclamation of existence of local emergency relating to the threat of community health posed by COVID-19. Item 3.2 is a resolution. It's an extension of proclamation of local homeless emergency. Item 3.2 is a resolution making required monthly findings and authorizing the continued use of teleconferencing for public meetings of the City Council and all city boards, commissions, and committees pursuant to Assembly Bill 361. Thank you.
Thank you. And for folks tuning in, but part of the reason we have a consent calendar even on today's agenda was because we had to, at the last minute, cancel our last council meeting, and each of these three items actually need to be reauthorized monthly, so we wanted to make sure that we had that opportunity to do so. Council, let's go ahead and see if there are any questions on the consent calendar. All right, seeing none, let's go to public comment, see if there are any comments on items 3.1 through 3.3.
Okay.
Yep. Make sure you get really close to that microphone so we can hear you.
Alrighty then. Hi, my name is Wes Below. I'd like to preface by saying that everything I'm about to say right now is backed up by the CDC's latest figures. In addition to the state of emergency for COVID-19, there are a number of untold emergencies caused by the government's response and over-response to the COVID-19 situation. First up is a mental health crisis. Did you know that unintentional injuries, that is, drug overdoses, suicide, and liver disease from alcoholism are now the first, second, and sixth leading causes of death for people ages 15 to 44. In addition, developmental crises in younger children are present. The Unit for Visually Impaired People, combined with the Italian Institute of Technology, found that children between 3 and 5 years old are only capable of recognizing facial expressions behind a mask just 40% of the time, and that will greatly hinder the development of basic human emotions like empathy. But the logic for the past 2 years has been that none of this has mattered because we need to cut down on the strain on our healthcare and emergency care system. So let's look at the facts. Omicron is a more transmissible variant of COVID-19, sure, but it is less deadly and it is less likely to result in long-haul complications. While Omicron cases are going up, hospitalization and death are not. And even then, natural immunity is confirmed to have a greater protection against COVID than vaccines alone. So if you're ever to catch COVID, which we eventually all will, this is the one to get. And this situation will actually better protect our community, who is 80% vaccinated, from getting worse variants in the future. I know we've all heard the critique of business and economics interfering with the public health, but we can't afford to throw our marketplaces and businesses under the bus here, and frankly, neither can any of you. Our tax dollars fund your paycheck, and we are paying you to serve us in the needs of the Republic. The more COVID regulations there are, the more fear your fellow council members push, the less money that finds its way to your paycheck and towards public services. You really want to buy out that Sears building down the street for $30 million a year in mortgage payments? Well, you better come up with the money, because it won't mean much if people are too overregulated to shop downtown or don't have their jobs. Please vote no on this extension of the state of emergency for public health in relation to COVID-19 for your sake and for the sake of your constituents. Thank you much.
Thank you. Let's see if there are any other comments on the consent calendar. All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Just for some information for folks in the public, one is that the city council does not make the health regulations. That's the health officer for the county of Sonoma. What the proclamation of emergency related to COVID-19 does is it allows our city manager to take action between council meetings without having to come to the council for approval, as well as makes us eligible for reimbursement for FEMA. I'll also say we are not purchasing the Sears site. That is also the Board of Supervisors, but I hope you'll reach out to your supervisors as well. With that, I'll go to the Vice Mayor to see if there is a motion for the table.
Thank you, Mayor. I move items 3.1 through items 3.3 and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Do we have any additional discussion, council? All right, seeing none, let's call the vote.
Councilmember Schwedhelm,
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers,
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Alvarez,
Aye.
Mayor Rogers.
Aye.
That motion passes with 6 ayes.
Great. We'll move on to item 4. That's the approval of the interview and appointment procedures. So item 4.1, Madam City Attorney and Madam City Clerk, who wants to handle this portion?
I will handle this portion, Mayor. I've provided each council member with a list of all applicants, and they're in alphabetical order, and ballots for each round of voting. On your ballots, please print your selections of each round of voting as initiated. At the end of each round of voting, I'll collect your ballots and then read them into the record and tally the votes. I will then announce those applicants eliminated at each round after each round of voting. Council members will be asked to strike through the names of eliminated applicants on the full list of all the applicants provided. As there are less than 10 applicants, City Council Policy 00023 states that each council member shall vote for 3 applicants in the first round, and then those applicants receiving 1 vote or less shall be eliminated. Subsequent votes shall be taken with each council member voting for 1 less applicant than voted for in the previous round. Only applicants not eliminated will be voted on. The applicant who receives 4 or more votes in the final round of voting shall be appointed to fill the vacancy.
Okay, council, do we have any questions on the procedures? Let's go ahead and go to public comment on item 4.1. See if anybody has comments on the procedures. I'm seeing nobody in the chamber, and I'm not seeing any hands on our Zoom. So I'll go ahead and bring it back. I believe we need a motion to adopt or sign off on the procedures. I'll look to see if anybody has a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, a motion from Councilmember Fleming and a second from Councilmember Sawyer. Let's go ahead and call the vote.
Councilmember Schwedhelm,
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer,
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers,
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Alvarez,
Aye.
Mayor Rogers.
Aye.
That motion passes with 6 ayes.
Okay.
And then I would also like to just inform the applicants here, when your name is called for your interview, you will come down and sit at the staff table in the middle where there is a chair and microphone provided for you to be interviewed.
All right, thank you. So we will, before we go on to item 5.1, it has been brought to my attention from both the city clerk and the city attorney that we have a very strict schedule in terms of timing. So we will begin our first interview at 4:15, and each of the interviews subsequently, because it's dictated in the agenda, we need to stick as close to that time as we can. So that means that there will be a 25-minute interview that includes an opportunity for the applicants to introduce themselves, questions from the council, and then a wrap-up moment. We will hear from all of the applicants and do the interviews before we take public comment, and then we'll have an opportunity for the public to weigh in on what they heard, what their preference is, or if there's something that they'd like the council to consider. Ultimately, we will end our day voting for who is going to take their seat here, replacing Councilmember Tibbetts. Did I miss anything, Madam Clerk?
Nope, that sounds about right.
Okay, I have our time at 4:12. So our first applicant is David Alex Shantz. You want to come on down and make yourself comfortable? Thank you for being here.
Testing, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm ready to begin my opening statement whenever.
All right, if everybody on council is ready.
Thank you. My name's Alex Shantz. Excuse me. Buenas noches. Good evening, councilors. Yo hablo pequeño español. Y yo hablo en inglés ahora. Sorry, forgive the space cadet. Anyways, my name's Alex. I'm gender non-binary. I sort of prefer they, he pronouns. I'm a Green Party member, and I'm homeless, currently living in Santa Rosa to be closer to my girlfriend. I've got an AA degree from Napa Valley College in Humanities and Philosophy, and a pre-law degree from Sac State in Philosophy with a concentration in Ethics, Law, and Politics. I'm running or applying for this position because I need a paycheck. I'm also passionate about politics, and I'm well familiar with Rosenberg's Rules of Order, the Brown Act, and Municipal Code, democratic procedures. I'm a former Salina School Board member, Napa Valley College student trustee, vice chair on Napa County's Gang and Youth Violence Commission, and I also served on Napa County's local food advisory councils. They had a subcommittee, a community gardens subcommittee, where we identified municipal parcels that could be developed into community gardens and whatnot. I also, while I was going to community college, spent some time working with the Napa Valley Dream Act Coalition. It's a group to fight for immigration justice for students. Concerning city council goal setting, and it's kind of building off the goals I noticed that had been set by the previous council, I'm looking at homelessness/housing, fiscal stability, and public safety reforms. Specifically, I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of economic development, and I'm kind of with like 3 pillars kind of holding them up. Banco Municipal, Abolición de la Policía, y Casas para Todos. I'll start with kind of my thoughts on housing. I think it would behoove us to consider housing approaches that don't require building or rebuilding. One option is eminent domain, identifying existing structures that don't need to be built, that could be caught into an eminent domain. Then an eviction moratorium, so there's no way we could evict people. It seems like one pathway to get some of our unhoused residents towards permanent housing without having to build more. And sorry, it's a bit scattered. The other sort of component of this is municipal banking. It would basically allow the city to raise capital for public projects, such as housing, without increasing taxes. And this could be a way to get at the housing issue, specifically like building, right? And then public safety reforms, specifically, the idea I'm trying to pitch is defunding the police in order to fund a municipal peace dividend. Just makes sense. The largest portion of the city's budget is public safety, police, fire. And, so by a peace dividend, I have things like social services, quality of life, mental health, those kinds of things in mind. And then I guess just to kind of sum up regarding like committee time, there's at least three committees I kind of looked at that seemed interesting to me. I guess one I'm interested in, obviously I'd have to talk to people to see the feasibility, but I'm interested in seeing if it's worth reactivating the rent stabilization subcommittee. Otherwise, but the public safety subcommittee and the art and public places committee are of interest to me. And I guess I'll just kind of end it there with my opening statements. I appreciate your time. I'll do my best to answer questions.
All right, thank you so much, Alex. So the way it'll work is council members will have a couple of minutes to ask what's on their mind, anything specific about your application or anything that's going on at the city that is focused on our city work. I'll go ahead and start all the way to my right on this one, and we'll change it up as we go through our interview process. But Councilmember Sawyer, do you want to kick us off?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Johns, if appointed to fill the District 3 seat, are you considering a formal run this year for an additional 2-year election to that seat?
I'm glad you asked the question. I was going to address that during my closing remarks, but my plan is to not run for the seat. If I'm appointed, I view myself as being a caretaker for the council seat, and just keeping it there or functional. I think I have the skill sets to do that, but I view myself as a caretaker until the next election where voters can pick the next representative.
Thank you. And our city's charter is currently being reviewed by the Charter Review Committee. The Charter Review Committee's recommendations could be considered some of the most important decisions facing this council this year. Are you familiar with the committee's endeavor and responsibilities?
I haven't researched the work of the committee in depth.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Let's go on to Councilmember Sweatham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your application, Alex. On your application, you had mentioned that you're passionate about municipal government. Could you expand on that a little bit more, and what does that look like?
Fair question, open question, broad question. Could you be more specific? I'm not trying to. I just have an interest
It's in
in
response to
politics.
your
Yeah, I
question
know.
about-
It's just it's weird because I guess a lot of people are like, well, why are you interested in this? Why are you doing this and that? I just kind of have an interest in politics. I've cited my background, experience governing in the past. When I look around, I'm also viewing this as a job opportunity, as in applying for a job. And frankly, this seemed like one of the few job openings out there that I felt qualified for, and that's not really a great answer. I don't know. This is just kind of what I'm passionate about. It's kind of what I know to do, and that was looking. I don't know.
Okay, what
Yeah,
do
I'll
you
just
see
end it
as,
there. Thank you.
If we were to appoint you, what do you see as being your biggest challenge if you were to become one of the 7 of us up here?
Again, good question. I'm not trying to be cute. I guess I hear challenge. I think opportunities. I mean, what would be the challenges? I'll just sort of. There's plenty I have to read and to learn, and plenty of people to talk to. There's all kinds of things like that are I don't know. I'll just sort of cite those as some challenges and just kind of make that my answer. Thank you.
Great, thanks. No more questions?
All right, Councilmember Fleming.
Mr. Shantz, I want to sincerely thank you for your interest in local government and in the city of Santa Rosa. my questions have been well answered by your responses so far, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Rogers?
Same. Thank you for your interest.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Sir, how are you today? What does the word equity mean to you, sir?
Can you repeat the question again?
What does the word equity mean to you?
Equity? I generally hear people use the term equity to mean something softer than like equality. Egalitarianism is a key value that's very key and important to me. It involves getting people at the table, you know, in key places to make decisions that, like specifically making sure marginalized voices in the community are at the table, having a say in the decisions that are made that are impacting them. I'd answer it that way.
Thank you. And how would you increase equity amongst our citizens of Santa Rosa?
Well, I'm younger. I'm gender non-binary, so there are those categories of representation that I could help with. Otherwise, I did mention in my opening remarks that the time I'd spent working with the Napa Valley Dream Act Coalition, immigrants' rights. That's a long-standing issue that I've been concerned about. Quite frankly, I think immigration rights is the big civil rights issue of my time under Obama, you know, getting more politically engaged. And so like that's absolutely a key demographic of the community that like I'm wanting to make sure isn't overlooked and is especially not being taken advantage of. I mean, obviously there's community leaders, city leaders out there, you know, way more powerful positions to ensure that kind of stuff than me, but that's just kind of where my head is at and where my values are at when it comes to that question and those issues.
Muchas gracias.
Alex, you wrote in your application you wanted to fight for economic democracy for the lumpen proletariat. How would you construct programs at the local level that achieve that goal?
So I think thinking about it in terms of economic development is key. Generally, I think when we talk about economic development, we're generally thinking about businesses and business interests, but economic development also has to do with like an individual's economic means. So like things like housing, social services. I think my ideas on housing, finding existing structures where we could use eminent domain is kind of consistent with that. The idea of trying to use some of the police budget to fund like a municipal peace dividend. I guess I'd point to those sorts of things to kind of like answer your question. Like those just the closest I can get to like specific policies that get at that question.
So one of the biggest items that we've worked on over the last 6 months or so, and we'll continue to work on, is the $37.5 million from the American Rescue Plan Act that the city has access to, as well as the PG&E settlement money, which is in upwards of $80 million. How could you utilize over $100 million if you were pie in the sky, clicking your fingers, to achieve some of these goals that you're shooting for?
I mean, I guess right off the bat, I think so if we're going with this intimate domain thing I'm talking about, like, so let's say hotels. The first step could be getting funding hotel vouchers for the homeless who need them, or I could apply to apartment complexes as well. Get them housed, once they're in those structures. Again, this is sort of like futuring, right? But like, if we could like sort of create and work with tenant unions inside the hotels as well with labor unions, like those are the kinds of pressures we could work with to try to get like eminent domain, and then like with an eviction moratorium, it'd be more permanent housing. I also, I do apologize. I think I kind of missed the first thought of your question, but did that answer it, or could you re-ask it?
Yeah, just basically what programs would you like to fund to have that type of impact? And I guess I'll also ask sort of a follow-up. Have you looked at the city's budget? Do you have any idea how much we spend on homelessness, on voucher programs, on rental assistance programs, any of those types of programs that you've mentioned so far?
I have looked over the city's budget. I do know that the funds for homelessness themselves, I think, was recently put under the city manager's department. So I think obviously, like, it's key that, you know, whatever like we want to do as a council is, you know, consistent with what the city manager would want to do, since that's where, you know, some of those funds are. Yeah.
Okay, that was my last question. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you. You've got a couple minutes for a closing statement. Anything that you'd like to highlight that you didn't in your opening, or any questions that you were expecting that you want to provide an answer to, the floor is yours.
All right, well, I think again, thank you all again for your time, and I appreciate staff for putting this meeting together. Things are kind of bearing with me. I've been a little bit clumsy today, but yeah, the only thing I'll just kind of emphasize is if I am appointed, I don't see myself running for the seat again. I really do want to be a caretaker if I get appointed to this position. And I guess I should mention too that if I don't get the appointment today, I did see this process as, you know, potentially serving as like an opportunity to, you know, apply for additional jobs in the future. So even if I don't get the appointment, I'd see it as a stepping stone, but I really would like it, and I think I have the skill sets and the passion to do a good job at it. So thanks for your consideration.
Oh, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming in and taking the time and wanting to make a difference in your community. So as you heard, we'll do all of our interviews. We'll deliberate towards the end of the day, and we'll make an appointment at that point.
Thank you again.
Great, thank you. So council, we have our next interview is at 4:45. So we'll take a brief recess. Don't go too far, and we'll come back, let's say at 4:42. Let's go ahead and bring us on back. And I see Councilmember Rogers is frantically making her way here with my Diet Coke, which I appreciate. Madam City Clerk, can you please call the roll so we can reestablish the quorum?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Schwedhelm,
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer,
Here.
Councilmember Rogers, Councilmember Fleming,
Here.
Vice Mayor Alvarez,
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Excellent. Our second interview is Diana McDonald. Diana, you saw the process in the beginning. Just as a reminder to folks, you have to get really close to that microphone for them to be able to hear. And you'll have 3 minutes to kick it off with an introduction and take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll just remind the council that I am hearing impaired, so if you don't mind speaking clearly into the microphone, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Hello, Mayor Rogers, Vice Mayor Alvarez, and members of the council. We were asked to answer 3 questions. I'm prepared to attend the Tuesday council meetings and spend time to prepare for those meetings. I'm available for goal-setting meetings, and I do not foresee any issues with subcommittee meetings either. In 1941, during the Great Depression, Charles Cubernus packed up his family and drove from North Dakota. He purchased a small piece of farmland out on Fulton Road, and 80 years later, my mother still lives there. My name's Diana McDonald, and Charles was my great-grandfather, and I'm a 4th-generation Santa Rosa resident. After I decided to apply for this vacancy, I read your 354 pages of budgets and 55 pages of fees and schedules, and realized how hard this city council is working to create opportunities for families, for young professionals, and for our senior population. My goal, if appointed, is to continue to support this work and bring my experience in government as a former elected official and as a legislative advocate to help. As a vice president for the finances for our family-owned and operated small business, I understand the challenges of running a business in Santa Rosa. I've worked with challenging school district budgets while I was a trustee for 8 years, and as a former president and CEO of the California State PTA, I know how to balance budgets and how to make tough decisions that create sustainability for the long term. I'm currently the legislative advocate for the California State PTA. I monitor all the federal legislation and the California state budget, so I'm aware of what's happening and at the state and federal level, and I can leverage that knowledge to support our community. As a child that was dyslexic, a former single mom in this county, starting a company during the last recession and maintaining it during this pandemic, as somebody who is hearing impaired, I am no stranger to challenges. I use my personal experiences to inspire me to make things easier for our community. And I would help keep a keen eye on ways we can promote access to all of our residents. I've worked with several organizations that have had a focus on DE&I, and I've helped to build a culture of respect, trust, and understanding across cultures. We have our work cut out for us with important issues such as homelessness, support for mental health, creating affordable housing, a massive shortage in childcare and preschool opportunities, deficit spending, floods, fires, the pandemic, but I look forward to those challenges. I've been advocating for children and families for 20 years, and I've worked at the state and national legislature to move the needle for California's children. My goal would be to apply those same skills for the betterment of Santa Rosa's residents, ensuring that we are appropriating money to best support our diverse community with projects and programs will take someone that understands multi-year budgeting and planning. As the decisions we make now will impact future generations, I'd be proud to work alongside you to make an effective decision and to continue to support the work you've done and that we still need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. I'll start to my left this time. Councilmember Rogers, do you want to kick off questions?
Wow. Wow. I was gonna ask, what is your passion? Like, it seems all of us have something that we're passionate about. Maybe a committee that we want to work on, or a specific goal that we have. So what is your passion?
What's my passion? It's hard to name just one thing, I would say, but I've been very passionate about supporting children and families. It's the work that I've done, creating equity and opportunities, specifically for our children of color, specifically for children who've been marginalized. I am super, super passionate about early childhood education. I've worked really hard to make sure that transitional kindergarten's been implemented into our school system, which it now will be. I have recently been put on the task force for Superintendent Thurman that focused on reading and ensuring that all of our third graders are at reading level. So a lot of my passion has been around education, supporting families, because I believe generational poverty and focusing on supporting the family is critical for us as decision makers, whether it be city council or school board trustee or the work that I've done in PTA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fleming?
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. I am curious to know, as an active business owner who has weathered some difficult times, what ideas you might bring to our city council, if appointed, to further empower and strengthen our small business community in particular.
Sure. So small businesses are challenged more than I think anyone right now. Even applying for a PPP loan, if you don't have the staff to help you do it, the staff to actually go through all the paperwork with you, then it can be overwhelming and impossible. I know the city's done a lot of outreach in supporting businesses, but I think we could probably do some more. It's clarification. I think when health orders come forward, the most that we could do is outreach to our businesses to make sure that they know what's coming so that they can prepare. But there's not enough workforce right now, and our unemployment, which is very good news, is quite low, but that also creates challenges when you need employees. And I know that's something that we've struggled with, is ensuring that we are creating opportunities for children to be college and career ready, to make sure that they can go into the workforce and into the trades as well, would be something that I think we could work with and partner with our schools. I'd say that you guys are doing a tremendous job on outreach. The communications on the website are, incredible. They're done in English and Spanish, but I would like to see us do maybe a bit more.
Thank you. I appreciate your answers.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for applying and joining us with this process. What's the most important thing for us to know about you in consideration for this position?
I'm sorry, what is the most important thing for you? What?
To know about you while we
To know
consider
about
your,
me.
for this position.
I would say to know that I'm extremely hardworking, and when I take something on, I take it seriously. I do my homework. If there's something that I'm not aware of or that I need to learn more about, I will reach out to others who are more proficient on that matter. I'm a collaborator, and I like to work together to find solutions that work for everyone, or the best that we can. You're never going to make everybody happy, but I'd like to make the majority of everybody happy. I find that I'm a team player. I like to make sure that everyone feels supported and do so in a respectful way. And I'm a good listener. So even though I'm hard of hearing, so that's ironic, I am a good listener. And so I do my best to, reach out to our community members. And I would just say that I'm very diligent and hardworking in that way.
Great, thank you. And then in your application, it asked about the two issues facing the city, and one of them that you mentioned was homelessness.
Sure.
So from your perspective and what you know, what are we doing right in the area of homelessness, and what do we need some improvement on?
Well, you've increased the budget tremendously to support homelessness, so that should be commended, first of all. You've done a lot of work. We've worked on the Home Key project, and I think that you're doing so far a great job as far as, expanding Sam Jones Hall and looking at 6th Street area to make sure that we have more opportunities. Being able to work with the St. Vincent de Paul Commons to help refurbish those would be something that we could do to increase stability for homes. And, we have a ton of services that the city has as far as, supporting our homelessness, but there's systematic issues that go beyond the city. There's need for mental health support, your work in the iResponse has been fantastic, making sure that we're responding to people where they really need their needs met as far as substance abuse and programs that sometimes trigger some of these issues around homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. So I don't think that I could say you've done anything wrong. I just say that it's going to have to continue to be something we focus on. The governor has proposed money to help sustain and create and support homelessness issues. And so I'm hoping that with my knowledge in the legislature and working with our partners over in Sacramento and as well as federal, we can work on that together.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for being here today. Really appreciate it. And thank you for a very comprehensive application. If appointed to fill the district's 3 seat, are you considering a formal run this year for an additional 2-year election to that seat?
If I was appointed, I would consider running. Thank you.
Thank you. Our city's charter is being reviewed by the Charter Review Committee currently. The Charter Review Committee's recommendations could be considered some of the most important decisions that this council will face this year. Are you familiar with the committee's endeavor and responsibilities?
I'm familiar with the Charter Committee. I'm not familiar with what they're recommending. I am familiar with the old 58 responses that was done 10 years ago, and I know that they're up every 10 years. So while I can't tell you specifics on them, I kind of see our charter being sort of like a bylaw for a nonprofit. It's how we run the city. It's what we're governed by. So I could see that being very critical to understand and have a deep knowledge of each of those areas, specifically ones that might be being changed and up for consideration.
Thank you. And is there something that was not asked in the application that you would like us to know about you?
I felt it was a pretty comprehensive application. It took me several hours to fill it out. So I can't imagine anything you haven't asked me other than I'm going to be a proud grandma in the spring. So that was in my application. But other than that, I think you have done a fine job in being able to get our background and our knowledge and expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. If you are to be appointed and form the 7th member of the City Council, how can we as a council further support our youth to overcome the challenges that they are facing during the COVID pandemic?
Okay, just so I'm sure I heard you, how would the council support me during the pandemic?
You as one, as a part of the council together, you as a council member, how can we as a united group empower our youth during the COVID challenges being presented, the unprecedented challenges being presented to our youth, school, mental health issues?
Okay, just so I'm sure I understand the question, I apologize.
No, not a problem.
Just so I know, we're wanting to know how the council could support me in the role of a council member during
as
the
part
COVID
of the
challenges.
council, together.
Okay. So certainly there's a ton of challenges with COVID, right? I think having the hybrid meetings and making sure that we continue to offer that, not just to me, but to public members, would be critical, as we could be exposed by our family members as well as community members. Having access would be great. Making sure things are given to us in closed caption would help me personally as far as being hearing impaired. I think that would be something to make sure that we're offering that on our meetings. But I think that right now, this team works really well together. And I don't see infighting. I see support that is being done. I think there's a big focus right now on Roseland because that's an area that hasn't had focus, and I want to continue that work. I think that there's a lot we could do to support businesses as far as, giving them information and making sure we're doing two-way communication to hear back from them. I think it would be good to sit down with our business community as well as our school business officials to make sure that we are getting two-way information on what's happening with them. And I think if you're looking at issues that continuously plague either women or communities of color, we have to just be willing to listen. As far as something I might need would be anything that I'm not familiar with as far as if it's around sewers or water, or to be able to be more proficient in those decisions, and then being able to reach out to community members or a member that's on those committees to get more information. Hope that answered your question. I understood you correctly. I apologize if not.
No, you did. And if I could expand on the question, our youth, how can we empower them specifically?
I'm sorry, am I about empowerment specifically?
Empowering our youth to face the challenges that COVID has presented them.
I'm sorry. It's so echoey.
Empowering our youth.
Oh, empowering our youth. Is that what you're saying? I'm so sorry. Sorry, Vice Mayor. Yes, I mean, right now in schools, we have an entire system around the local control accountability cards. And one of the things that we do is school climate and outreaching to our student voices. And I think that's critical, whether you're in city government or in school government. The more that we could reach out to those student voices, they come up with really incredible ideas on how to fix things, solutions, right? And I always say, my kids are millennials, and if they want to find a way that's quicker and easier to do something, we ask them because they know technology and they know how to implement things. And so sometimes that old way of doing things, we have to be able to listen to the new generation and those young, powerful voices and empowering them to have a seat at the table as well.
Thank you, and I completely understand the challenges that we, even as adults, face due to the mask that we wear, and the challenges that even we face, and it's only unimaginable the challenges that our children are facing. So I do appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So District 3 is mostly, if not entirely, in the wildland-urban interface. There have been homes that have been lost there, and there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done on fire recovery and resiliency. Would you have advocated for homes to be rebuilt? And if not, how would you handle development in the wildland-urban interface?
Well, I believe in infill housing and looking at our urban growth boundaries to make sure that when we are doing affordable housing and we are looking at redevelopment, that we're sticking to those guidelines. And then making sure that we are doing environmental impacts and that we have all that data before it comes before City Council on any decisions we make as far as housing and improvements. As far as the fire rebuilds, I can tell you as a victim of the 2019 fires, it is a real issue. We had over $100,000 worth of damage done to our own personal home in 2019. So making sure that we are thoughtful with fire mitigation, making sure that we're doing our part not only as homeowners, but that we're looking at personal forests and supporting our community members that have those to make sure that we're doing our part to keep the creeks cleaned out, as well as anything else that would need to be cut down. I mean, I see the city out in my backyard, well, not my personal backyard, but outside, weed eating and keeping weeds down. As far as rebuild goes, it's hard to tell somebody when they've owned their own property and their own home that they can't rebuild there. So I would have to have that information and data in front of me. I think that would be a tough decision as far as a policymaker goes to tell somebody what they can and can't do with their own personal property.
Okay. Councilor, are there any other questions? All right, I'm going to turn it back over to you for your closing.
Sure. Thank you. As I stated earlier, I am diligent and hardworking and will be committed to reading your agendas, supporting documents, meeting with staff, and being prepared for our weekly meetings and other committee meetings. I'm here to listen to you and to our community so I can learn from you and our community and that we can make the best decisions for our community members. Our mission is to provide high-quality public services and cultivate a vibrant, resilient, and livable city. Our current goals support that mission, and my goal is to help implement the mission and our vision for the Santa Rosa to be a vibrant, safe, affordable place to live, a leader in the North Bay. Santa Rosa is ranked the 10th happiest place to live in the U.S. despite all of our challenges, and that is to all of your credit. My goal is to help make us number one. I'm committed to our city and our community, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here and apply for this vacancy on City Council. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Diana.
Thank you.
We are about 5 minutes ahead, Council, so we'll take just a quick 5. Don't go far, and we'll come back for our third applicant, James Devore. Excuse me, Councilmember Schwedhelm, the gavel has swung. Madam City Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Schwedhelm,
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer,
Here.
Councilmember Rogers,
Present.
Councilmember Fleming,
Here.
Vice Mayor Alvarez,
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Let the record show that all council members are present.
And I would be a little bit remiss if I didn't refer to him as Grandpa Schwedhelm. So a big congratulations to the new grandpa at the dais.
Thank
We
you.
have our third applicant in front of us. Thank you so much, James. You have the same amount of time everybody else did. You'll have the 3 minutes for your opening statement, questions from council members, and then we'll give you a chance to wrap up as well. But with that, I'll just turn it over to you. Get really close to that microphone and make sure the green light is on.
Okay, can you hear me? Great, thank you very much. First, I'd like to just thank each of you for giving serious consideration to my application for this position. I recognize that I'm a little bit of a unorthodox candidate in some ways, and I do appreciate the importance of this job and the importance of the appointment, so thank you. And I thought what I would do in this brief time is just give a snapshot of what I believe you would get if you picked me, bullet points. And let me give it a shot. The first bullet point is that you would get a professional level of commitment to doing this job. If I was appointed, I would come in prepared, on time, and ready to work and ready to engage. So you would get that for sure. Second thing is you would get a lot of collegiality. And I would say that any success I've had in my life in practicing medicine or in my leadership roles, it's been based on relationships. And that's what I enjoy about work. I enjoy meeting people and working with people. And that's a really sincere thing for me to say. It's fundamental to how I like to work. And I like to have fun with my colleagues doing the work. So you would get that for sure. Third, I would call it a public servant mindset, that I am truly not in this for any personal gain or recognition. I've had some of that, and I'm good with that. I'm not coming in with any political ideology or partisan. I don't have a single issues that I'm promoting. I truly am in this to do what I can for the city of Santa Rosa. Next bullet point is leadership. I really do feel like my leadership skill set and my experience is still worth something. I retired in July from a very big job leading 500 doctors in Northern California region, and I feel like, honestly, I'm not ready to just walk off or wander off into the sunset. I feel like I still have something to give, and I think the leadership experience I have would serve me in this position. And lastly, just the lifetime of taking care of patients in primary care and the front lines of care, being with patients and families and knowing what they go through. I don't want to over-exaggerate this, but this is an experience that it informs everything I do. And I certainly would bring that to this position on City Council if I were given the opportunity. So I think I'll just stop right there. In answer to the three questions, I would not be available for 2 Tuesday meetings between now and the end of the year. I'm going to be off the grid. And everything else I'm good. For the planning sessions and any other committee work, I'm fully available. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I'll start to my right. Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Devore, for your complete application. You've heard these questions before, and with other applicants, and I will ask you the same question. If appointed to fill the District 3 seat, are you considering a formal run this year for an additional 2-year election to that seat?
I truly don't know. And not only do I not know, but I don't know if if it would help me to say yes or to help me to say no. I just don't know. I definitely would consider it, of course. And if I feel like I can be effective in this role and if I'm enjoying the process, which I probably would, but I think I would know in 3 or 4 months probably after starting on this adventure. So sorry, I just can't say for sure.
Thank you. And our city's charter is currently being reviewed by the Charter Review Committee. The Charter Review Committee's recommendations could be considered some of the most important decisions facing this council this year. Are you familiar with this committee's endeavors and responsibilities?
Yeah, I am familiar with it. I understand that we're in this charter review process, and the Charter Review Committee is deep at work on this. And I am aware that there's 4 or 5 really important issues. I think that if I had to prioritize which one is maybe the most potentially controversial, maybe the one that the public would be most interested in would be the issue about a directly elected mayor issue. And it really fascinates me that issue is will be before the city council, because it is a little bit perplexing to me on multiple different levels. But yes, I'm aware of it, and I'm aware that there are going to be pros and cons to making that consideration. But my question is, why are we considering that now? Why are we considering going to a directly elected mayor when it seems like the current system is working pretty well? I feel like when we went to the district election, we made some real progress in terms of the potential for a diverse city council and the potential for including the mayor position. And my concern, and I may be wrong, I'm open to hearing feedback, but my concern is if we directly elected the mayor, we might be going backwards on that potentially having a diverse city government. So anyway, I would have to thoughtfully consider the pros and cons and hear the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee before I would be prepared to vote on that. I really don't know how I would vote if I had to today.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schwedo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Devore, for applying and participating in this process with us. In your application, when it talked about 2 issues facing the city, you talked about emergency preparedness. And I think your words were, Santa Rosa must be well prepared for whatever the next emergency or disaster may hit us. How do you think we're doing, and what do we need to be doing now to be prepared for what may be coming this year, next year, in the future?
I actually went back and sort of reviewed where we stand with that, and I was pretty impressed. There was a lot of detail available to the public on how to get emergency messages and so forth. So I really feel like in that way, I feel like we are well prepared. But I have to say, thinking about District 3 and specifically the Oakmont community, I knocked on some doors out there when I was in this nomination process, and I'm going to tell you every single one, 100% of them, wanted to tell you about their evacuation story. That was it. And they all had harrowing experiences with evacuation, and that's what they care about. So yeah, we may be really well prepared, but they're concerned about the next fire, and particularly the evacuation issue. So to me, that would be something that I would really want to pay attention to if I got this position. I would want to spend some time out there and make sure I understand where we stand with that particular issue, the evacuation issue with Channel Drive and so forth. But overall, I don't have any complaints about the overall preparation for emergencies and disasters.
Thank you. And then you probably heard earlier today we had an item about the COVID and the public health order. Given your experience, how do you see your experience interacting with the roles and responsibility that the city council has as it pertains to public health orders? Because I'm venturing to guess you know a heck of a lot more than the 6 of us sitting up here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. When COVID hit, it started in Seattle at Providence Hospital in Seattle. That was ground zero for COVID. And I was in this regional leadership position at the time, and it was extremely stressful. And I think that you remember back then, there was all the drama around PPE and what to do, and then testing came online, and there was procedural questions about how aggressive should we be, and all of that. And all of that is still playing out today, 2 years later. And so, Yes, I feel like I have expertise, and I feel like I could really participate with, with City of Santa Rosa. But part of the thing I think we need to do is tamp down some of the drama and some of the polarization, and because the science behind all of these mandates and regulations is not super solid. So yes, I feel like I could be a subject matter expert on the city council, but I would be very reluctant to start, throwing around my ideas and, contrary to the public health officers or the state mandates or whatever. I would want to be pretty careful with how I position myself there.
Great. Thank you.
Councilmember Fleming?
Thank you, Dr. Devore, for your time and being interested in coming to serve at the City of Santa Rosa. I have a couple of questions for you. One is, how do you see, or how would you define your philosophy or approach to governance? And if you don't have one yet, how would you develop an approach, and what sources might you use?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you actually. Can you say that again?
Sure, I'm talking about like a philosophy of governance or an approach to how you would take on the work, what lens you might look at this work through.
Boy, I could take that so many different directions. Are you talking about sort of principles that I have in my life that I would bring to it?
It's intended to be an open-ended question to let you express how you view the work that you might take on. There's really no wrong answer. I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, I think my work is informed by being a practicing physician, and I think that when you think about the whole DEI thing, what I realize are that the values in the DEI movement are exactly the same values that are foundational and fundamental to me personally, and to the way I've practiced. And they're labeled slightly differently, but like the value of dignity, respecting the dignity of every individual, that's a pretty fundamental value for me personally, and one that that I hold, deeply. And the value of justice, the value of standing with the vulnerable and the underserved. Again, these are in the DEI, but they're slightly different, nomenclature.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah. So to that end, then oftentimes, nearly all the time our council votes together, and the most difficult times we have, and we still, I think, are pretty collegial, is over land use, and oftentimes it's the issue of property rights versus the issue of more marginalized communities, and it's not so straightforward because sometimes mixed in there you have marginalized individuals with property rights mixed in with more well-resourced property owners. How might you approach a difficult land use decision like that?
Well, again, I think you're right. I think so many times with the work that you do as leaders in the community, so many times there's competing values. And that happens all the time, actually. On one hand, you have the values. The homelessness thing's another example. On one hand, you have the value, or the value that respects the individual's right to decide for themselves what to do. That sometimes will butt up against the value that the city, it has to represent the entire community. And the same thing with land rights. If you talk about like the short-term rental issue, like if you have a rental in your neighborhood and that it becomes a party house on weekends, the owner of that house theoretically has the right to rent that house out, but yet the neighbors have a right to not have that, degrade the quality of their neighborhood. And those are values that butt up against one another. So, I mean, clearly it has to be, hopefully there would be room in the middle somewhere, but each of those issues is going to have to be a discernment process, in some cases a legal process.
Yeah, so you brought up the short-term rental one, so how would you approach that one?
If it was in my neighborhood, we would not be able to allow it at all. I don't know. It's a perfect example of two values that butt up against one another.
Let me ask the question a different way and give you an opportunity to share a time when you had to balance those two types of competing interests in your professional life?
I think it happens all the time in, back to a medical example. You have somebody who is impaired, maybe somebody who has a cognitive disorder, who doesn't want to go to a nursing home. And some people think that the grandpa needs to be in a nursing home. Grandpa thinks he's fine to continue to live by himself. That happens all the time. And so, which value do you go with? Do you go with the grandpa has the right, even if it's dangerous, to live at home alone, even if, he sets the kitchen on fire? Or is it that he doesn't really have that capacity, therefore he shouldn't have the right to make that decision for himself? That plays out, I think, as you know, in the medical world over and over again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time and the care you put into your application.
Sure.
Councilmember Rogers?
Hi. Thank you for taking the time to be here today and to apply and for your interest. My question is, being in the position that you were formerly in, and in the medical field, we know that there are a lot of inequities within the medical field. From my perspective, there are a lot of inequities within the medical field. So can you please provide a situation where you feel like you stood up, where there was in a situation where there was an inequity, where you had to stand up, where maybe it wasn't the most favorable thing that you had to do, but to stand up for something that you believed in, for something that you felt was right?
Yeah, I think I would just speak to to speak a little bit about just mental health for a second, maybe as a way to help answer that. But the mental health crisis that we face is because there's simply not enough services for the pent-up need. There's a gigantic gap there. And so you have, and if you want to shine a spotlight on where there's disparity between the haves and the have-nots, that's it. That is, because if you have means, if you have insurance, if you have money, if you have the ability to pay, you're going to be able to access all the mental health care you need, no problem. But in the underserved community, people who can't afford it, they're not going to get mental health services. And many of them, it's not even on their radar. They're not even thinking about it because it's just not an option. So I think, I think when you look at a disparity like that, it really shines a spotlight on an opportunity. Now, I could give you many examples, throughout my medical career of where patients simply don't have access to the care they need. It's super frustrating. And sometimes, you have to pick up the phone and try to lean hard on, let's say, a doctor to take the patient without payment, something like that. But those stories, play out over and over and over again in the medical world, just simply because some patients don't have access to the care, or they don't have the ability to pay for the care.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Doctor, it's good to have you here today.
Thank you.
Can you speak to us about your medical experience and how those experiences have prepared you to lead our city forward?
Well, again, it gets back to the values. And, when I started working for St. Joseph Health, which is about 13 years ago, those values were explicit. And they were basically the mission and the values of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And when I joined, I was really not aware of what, faith-based healthcare looked like, and certainly not a Catholic system. But the values are explicit. They are there to serve the underserved. And so, that's why Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital exists, to serve the underserved. That's why the medical group exists. All the clinics, all the specialists, the ICU, the ER, all of it exists for the purposes of serving the underserved. And, you know, so St. Joseph Health is, I think the sisters of St. Joseph have really established that as fundamental. So for me personally, you know, I've got to, you know, if I'm not on board with that, I'm in the wrong business, I'm in the wrong profession, and I'm working for the wrong company, because they are deadly serious about, the level of commitment that they ask for. And my job as a physician leader was not only to practice those values, but to lead those values, because every physician we hired had to be on board with that. There's nearly 500 doctors now in the system in Northern California that all of them have to be on board with that. Take care of the patients no matter what, no matter who they are, what they look like, or, you know, how they came before you. So I could talk more about this, but I think it all starts with your values and you know, what you believe people deserve.
And if I may follow up, you stated the word underserved, I'm sorry. As a public official creating policy, how can you help the underserved?
Well, again, there's gaps, and you know, it's not that hard to find the gaps. You know, the gaps, the disparity gaps. Another example of that I just thought of was that portrait Sonoma. That data, you look at that data, and it's very easy to see disparities. And one example was there's a disparity between a neighborhood in Santa Rosa, I think an affluent neighborhood, and another neighborhood of something like 12 or 13 years longevity, less longevity, life expectancy in one neighborhood versus another one. That's a massive disparity, and it's an opportunity. And I don't know the reason for it, but I think that you know, that's an opportunity for us to do a deep dive into it, understand it, and then action plan that. So I forgot what your question was, but you know, I do think that we have opportunities everywhere with finding disparities like that and then doing something about them.
You were along the question lines in regards to policymaking and addressing the underserved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doctor. I get the last question or two here. I wanted to pull on a thread that Councilmember Fleming asked about, and that's the contradiction that you oftentimes find between your goals and your priorities. And the council had one within the last couple of months. We had the water demand offset fee that came forward, and it was potentially a contradiction between the council's desire to build housing and how we address the drought. So my question is, how would you approach those types of contradictions? And in that sort of a circumstance, do you think Santa Rosa should continue to build when we are in a severe drought? And if yes, how would you address it? If not, why not?
So it's another great example of conflicting values, because the affordable housing crisis is one of the top priorities in our city. It's one of the biggest problems. It has to be addressed aggressively, and it can't be something that's just put to the side. We are at risk of becoming an elite city that is only affordable by the most affluent. That's not the vision of a city that I have. This city has to be, it has to be for working class, and has to be for all income levels, and so we can't ignore the responsibility to address affordable housing. But I know it's being addressed, and I think the idea of bringing it downtown and higher density, and bringing it around where there's public transport and where there's retail, I think that's directionally the right way. But in the RED initiative, all of that work is, I think, to be applauded for sure. But you don't want to solve the housing crisis by degrading the community in a way that makes it less livable, and it takes away the reasons that we love living here. So those can't be, they can't be exclusive. You have to do both. And if you build right, if you build smart, you should be able to address the housing need, but not give up what's special. And by the way, I was a little bit, I consider myself an environmentalist. I've not been labeled as an environmentalist, but I feel very dedicated to the responsibility we have to preserve our natural environment. And I'll just, 1 second, but I run up in Annandale a lot. I was up there this morning, and Annandale is an incredible resource. It's miraculous. It's pristine, beautiful, and it's in the middle of our city. And every time I'm up there, I think of Henry Trioni. That's what I think of. That guy, one guy, had the vision to preserve that space. Otherwise, there would be housing today. And so I think we all need to be visionary in terms of trying to solve this problem. I don't necessarily feel like it's easy. It's definitely not. But we have to do both. We have to do both.
So if I can push a little bit further. So water's a finite resource. We only have so much to be able to utilize each year. Would you say no new development if there isn't water to offset it? Would you say potentially a fee to develop water projects? How would you, because from a functional perspective, you have to you can't create more water when there's none that's coming from the sky with our given resources. So how would you approach an issue where the two sides are pitted against one another?
It's a really tough question, obviously. Obviously, we shouldn't be building and growing if we don't have water. What I don't know is, I don't know how critical our water supply is. I think we need to plan on the worst. I think we need to plan on the idea that the drought that we're experiencing now is maybe the new normal. So yeah, so if it means that we're going to run out of water if we continue going the way we're going, then we shouldn't continue going the way we're going. But honestly, Mr. Mayor, this is an area where I would engage deeply with experts and really try to dig in and understand this. I don't really feel like I'm prepared now to side up on one side or the other. I just don't feel like I have the knowledge base.
No, I can absolutely appreciate that. I more wanted to see what your thought process was on how you would get there. So I appreciate that. The answer to me didn't matter. It was how would you think about the issues in the future. So I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
So with that, we'll go ahead and go. You've got a couple minutes here to do a closing statement. Is there anything that you'd like the council to know about you? Anything that you missed from the questions or expected to be asked or wanted to highlight? We're all ears.
Thank you. Now, I would just close by saying that I hope it's pretty clear that if you selected me, I hope it's pretty clear that you know what you would get and what you would not get. And I'm trying to be really transparent about it. You know that I'm not an insider. I don't have direct experience with city government. I don't have that. But I do have I have a work ethic and the desire, to serve. I feel like I would bring a lot of collegiality. I feel like you guys would probably have fun working with me, and I definitely would have fun working with you. I think, I really would enjoy that aspect of this work, solving problems together. I feel like my leadership is still worth something. I'm only 6 months out of retirement. I feel like it still would really serve me well and help me be effective. And again, just the lifetime experience I had as a family doctor, I feel like I have the values and the experience to put that to use in city government as well. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your consideration. I do recognize that you guys have to make a tough decision here tonight, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Devore. We appreciate your interest in the position and everything that you do in the community and your interest in making Santa Rosa a better place. So thank you for taking the time with us here today.
Thank you.
I think we can go ahead and roll into our next interview. That'd be Melanie. Come on up. How's it going?
It's going well. Good evening.
So you've seen a couple of these interviews so far. We'll go ahead and just start off with an opportunity for you to talk a little bit about your background, why you're interested in the position, and anything that you think that the council should know about you before we get into some of the back and forth Q&A.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Rogers, Vice Mayor Alvarez, esteemed members of the council and city staff, first off, thank you for your commitment to the city. Following this council, I have observed that despite difficult issues, you always come together and find consensus. This is a value I too share. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Melanie Nacuzzi. I grew up in Santa Rosa and am the oldest of 7 children. At 17, I left the area to attend Stanford University, where I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering product design, which basically means that I am a professional problem solver. While at Stanford, I served as manager of the LGBT co-op, which is the largest co-op on campus there. I learned to handle interpersonal issues between residents and to balance a budget. After Stanford, I worked as an engineer at a Silicon Valley startup. In 2014, I left the Bay Area in pursuit of a lifelong dream. I hiked over 2,000 miles from Mexico to Canada along the Pacific Crest Trail. I spent 5 months living out of a tent and am familiar with the hardships of that lifestyle. After my hike, I took on an applied engineering management role at Mammoth Mountain Ski Area. I had many coworkers who lived in vans due to a lack of affordable housing. Additionally, I saw firsthand how climate change and drought threaten California's water supply and its fire safety. I moved back to Santa Rosa in 2020 to start a family of my own. My son and husband are here today joining me. My son is a 4th-generation Santa Rosan. 5 of my siblings still live here. My grandparents, Wally and Ellie Lowry, and my mother, Stephanie Nacuzzi, all served on boards with the city. My father is an immigrant, and I have seen the discrimination he faces due to his skin color and accent, and the fact that he grew up in a different culture. I have spent time living abroad myself. I am bilingual and bicultural. Furthermore, my parents are both physicians and have helped to keep me well informed on COVID-19 related issues. I am prepared to attend all council, subcommittee, and goal-setting meetings. I am versed on the city's Tier 1 top priorities. I have time for this opportunity before I re-enter the engineering world. And in me, the council has an opportunity to honor the voters and appoint someone who closely matches Jack Tibbetts. We are both 31 years old and young parents. Jack and I were actually classmates at Montgomery High School, are 2 pages apart from each other in the yearbook, actually. And Councilmember Tibbetts was elected to bring fresh perspective to this council, and I believe I can pick up where he left off.
All right, well, thank you so much. I will start to my left with Councilmember Rogers with questions.
Hi, thank you for being here today and applying. So, looking at the similarities between you and Jack, I'm going to ask you a question to kind of point out the obvious, I guess. How, you said that I heard you say you're going to re-enter the engineering world, right?
Yes.
So, you're going to re-enter the engineering world and be on council. Are you planning to run for the permanent seat?
No, I will not run in November for the permanent seat because I do want to go back into my trained career. And yeah, it's something I want to go back into, but I kind of have this opportunity now to give back to the community, hence, and this appointment arose, and I thought I was encouraged to apply, I should say, and it's something I got excited about because of the process you guys use to come to decisions. It's very much up my alley in terms of idea generating and consensus to make decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Ms. Nacuzzi. Thank you so much for your interest in local government, and I think it's wonderful that we're getting more and more people with young children and different types of backgrounds interested in serving. I think Councilmember Rogers was pointing out that it is a lot to raise a child and a lot to be on the council. But nonetheless, some of us manage it, and it is a sacrifice. At any rate, I'd like to focus on what your philosophy of governance is, how you would approach difficult issues, and have a little bit of a back and forth.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. Well, I guess my philosophy in any kind of decision-making is the importance of consensus. When you have different parties with different needs, it's something I'm a natural at. I think as the oldest of 7, I dealt with a lot of conflict resolution within my own family. When I was house manager at the LGBT co-op, we had, I'm going to give you an example of how I dealt with a conflict. We had an international member say, I know what a woman is and a woman can have children. And he was overheard by one of our transgender members. And this arose to my attention, and it was something I knew I would have to confront. And given my experience with international people, I've lived abroad myself, I knew that they sometimes have trouble understanding these issues. So I mitigated some house meetings where I brought together the various parties, led some open discussions, and in the end, the situation did resolve when people could see each other's point of views. Another example was when I was working at Mammoth, when I first started there and I was promoted. One of my coworkers, he held some resentment that I had been promoted over him, and he let me know very verbally that he didn't want me babysitting him, and I knew I had to confront that situation before it snowballed. And so one evening I pulled him aside and I let him know that I valued his knowledge and his years of experience. And I think that's what he was looking for, was that I did appreciate that. And from then on, we worked really well together for my remaining years there. So I do see how important it is to have compromise when you have different points of view. And it's something that council does really well, and something that got me excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, and we do it, and there are a lot of opportunities to do it. But sometimes there is a zero-sum game, unfortunately. Like I was talking about before with the previous applicant, around when there's limited resources around land use, for example. And so one example is that we've been dealing with is the idea of short-term rentals. So people renting out their homes, and we have certain places in the community where we have a lot of these on a block, and neighborhoods are being eroded, and people are unable to enjoy community life the way they'd like. And then on the other hand, you have the property rights of the owners of those parcels. So how would you balance something like that? And that's not even one touching on where we're dealing with really vulnerable people in general. How would you approach something like that?
Yes, that is a very important issue, and one that has, I know, been in front of the council recently. It is something I've seen myself in my experiences. My family owns a condo in San Diego, and that building has rules about no short-term rentals, and Then we would go to the beaches where it's all short-term rentals, and it's a very different atmosphere there. A lot of partying going on. I think it is important to hear everyone's sides. I get that the idea the owners want to be able to do what they, it's their home, they can do what they want. But I also get the side of the neighbors who want to maintain a certain atmosphere in their neighborhood. And I think it's important to have all voices represented at the table. There are ways, I think, to mitigate the concerns of the neighbors, things like owner-occupant requirements. And it's something that maybe a subcommittee could be appointed for that could look further into it. And it's something I'd be happy to take charge on. With my product design experience, I am very good at leading brainstorming sessions. That is a key tenet in product design. So it's something that I think needs to be explored further.
Excellent, thank you. And I can't help but point out that if appointed, you'd be the youngest of 7, so as opposed to the oldest. Anyway, thank you for your interest.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Sweathill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again for applying for this and participating in this process. So I saw in your application about the issues affecting the city, you talked about affordable housing, which is pretty consistent since I've been on council. It's been one of our priorities. What are we doing well in this area, and what areas do we need to improve on?
Yeah, it is a very important issue, and one that's across California an important issue, really. I think the council is doing a good job. It's a tricky one. I myself have lived in many cities. Like I've said, I've lived in Berkeley. My sister lives in New York. These are cities where they've had to deal with the same thing, density and affordable housing versus maintaining the characters of the neighborhood. I think one elegant solution that I've seen that balances these various needs is to maintain the existing structures, but to allow more density there, either by adding flats or creating a duplex out of a single family dwelling. And I know this is something California, the state, has been dealing with as well. They know they passed the Home Act last year to ease that process. I think right now the process of increasing density is expensive, timely, and a difficult process. And if anything the city could do to make it more smoother and streamlined is important. But balancing that against turning into a place to be taken over by outside investors looking to develop and the city. It's important to keep the neighbors and the characters of the neighbors, the neighborhoods, to preserve that. So I think it's another issue where you have multiple voices, and it's important to have all voices at the table. And I think looking to other cities for examples of how they've dealt with the issue could be a valuable way to go.
Okay. And then earlier during your response to one of the questions, you talked about consensus, and I'm not sure if you called yourself an expert, but you have a lot of experience in that. Tell me how consensus and those experiences would apply to being one of 7 on a council environment.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one of those things where open dialogue is very important in understanding each person's point of view. Like I said, my background is in product design, and through product design, a lot of it is about going out and observing your user group and understanding how they see the world, walking in their shoes. And when you really understand people, you can go ahead and design for them. So with that in mind, I try to, when I approach any contentious issue, see each point of view, keep an open mind, and move forward together in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Melanie, for being here this afternoon. I have great fond memories of working with Ellie and Wally. Our city's charter is currently being reviewed by the Charter Review Committee, and the Charter Review Committee's recommendations could be considered some of the most important decisions facing this council this year. Are you familiar with the committee's endeavor and responsibilities?
The short answer is yes. I understand what the city charter is and that it is reviewed every 10 years. Like one of the previous applicants mentioned, I know that the elected mayor is a big issue coming up. And I guess I would have to hear what their recommendations are before I could commit to yay or nay on that.
Are you familiar with of the issues that you are hearing that they're dealing with? Do you have a sense of what you consider two of the most important issues that they're currently considering on the review committee? In addition to the directly elected mayor? That could be one.
Yeah, give me a second. I would have to review it further before I really could give a good answer to that question. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Melanie.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Having had the opportunity to learn of our parents' struggle as immigrants, what do you consider to be the largest obstacle that we have as citizens, natural or born citizens, and how can we improve the experiences of the immigrant community moving forward?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for that question. It is a very important one. I know it's one of the top priorities for this council to have good representation of the diverse population of Santa Rosa. I lived abroad in my dad's home country, which is Lebanon. I lived abroad for a year, and in Lebanon, they actually 30% of the population there are refugees. It has the highest number of refugees per capita of any place in the world. And so in that kind of environment where you have so many different religions and cultures and beliefs, representation is very important, and compromise as well. Lebanon has been through civil war and infighting, and it really went nowhere and actually caused economic destruction. So with that in mind, it is important, I think, to make sure you have all voices at the table. It is something I think I can offer to the council as a daughter of an immigrant, to just have more equal representation. I can also represent mothers of young children. I know there are other mothers on the council, but you saw my child. He's less than a year old. I think it's important to have all voices at the table to help make sure people feel valued and heard.
Thank you very much.
All right, so first and foremost, I have to tell you, I'm resisting the urge to ask you questions about Jack in high school, even though I think all of us have many. Are you familiar with how the city discharges its wastewater?
I am not. I guess, go if you could, I'm not. Yeah.
We have an innovative approach where we pipe our wastewater and inject it into the geysers to create clean energy. You heard some of the contradiction questions about competing policies. We obviously have the drought. That wastewater could potentially be used differently should we break the lease with the geysers, but at the detriment of our green energy production. How would you approach that sort of a short-term impact versus long-term impact trade-off?
Yeah, that is a good question. Water being a very limited resource. It's one of those issues where, yeah, you have two strong sides, short-term versus long-term. It's important to think about both sides of the story, with the using the water, reusing the water, that side. We need the water. The population's getting bigger. The drought is becoming maybe the new normal. Those are all good reasons to consider using that water. But then the clean energy side is, I want Santa Rosa to be a nice place to live for my son as he grows up. And we do need to go more clean, because renewable energy is important in combating another limited resource, which is non-renewable sources of energy. It's an issue that I think a subcommittee could be formed for to weigh both sides of the issue. Any solution would have to really find a balance between the two needs, and maybe it's something that it doesn't have to be all or none on, that maybe some wastewater could be used and turned into fresh water, and some could still go to the geyser, rather than dealing with absolutes, but find a middle ground between the two sides.
Okay, in keeping with the climate change theme, because we haven't asked too many questions about that from applicants yet, 2/3 of the state's housing was created before you had any type of energy standards. Should taxpayer dollars go towards fixing those homes, or should a mandate be made to make those homes come up to higher standards?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It hits people in their pocketbooks. I mean, in an ideal situation, yes, it would be paid for by the government, but I understand that that's a limited resource on the government side. I think you can't just, you'd have to get rid of something in order to pay for that program. And I can't think of anything to get rid of. It's something that I think has to be phased in over time, that as improvements get put into buildings, that would be the opportunity to upgrade to a more sustainable design. Again, it's something I think that has to be phased in over time. And I know it's something that Santa Rosa isn't dealing with uniquely. It's something that we could look at other cities and see how they're approaching the issue. So not an easy yay or nay. There's a gray area in between.
All right, I appreciate that. Are there any other questions from council? Okay, I'm going to go do your closing, and just again a huge thank you for sitting here and letting us grill you a little bit.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the opportunity. I come to you today as a candidate who offers diversity, both in my blood and in my life experiences. I am a strong believer in resolving conflict through consensus. I can round out the council by representing parents of young children and by bringing the wealth of knowledge I've built living around the country and the world. I would like to end with a poem I wrote for you all. I have lived many places, and for what it's worth, I can say Santa Rosa is the most beautiful on earth. I have seen how war and infighting only lead to demise, so I believe in the power of compromise. Before I return to work, this is an opportunity to join the council and give back to the community. You can honor the voters with this decision by replacing Jack Tibbetts with one of equal vision. Santa Rosa is a leader, that is no mystery. Together, we can make this the best year in history. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Council, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back in 5 minutes for our next applicant. Madam City Clerk, can we please call the roll and establish the quorum?
Thank you. Councilmember Schwedhelm.
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Fleming.
Here.
Vice Mayor Alvarez.
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Okay, we'll move on to our next applicant. It's Christopher Miller. Christopher, come on down. Welcome in, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. As you've seen from others, make sure you keep the microphone really close to your face and make sure the green dot is on. You'll have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and talk about anything in your experience that you think is relevant or that the council might consider. And then you've seen a little bit, we'll do ping pong, asking questions from council members as we try to make our determination. So with that, go ahead and take it away.
Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this process. Unlike some people here, I was not born here, but I have a cousin in Texas who likes to say, I got here as soon as I could. I came in 1977 to join a local law firm and have been a part of the community ever since. My wife was a teacher at Slater and Montgomery until she retired in 2005. We raised 5 children who all went to Santa Rosa City Schools here, and we love Santa Rosa. I didn't take on this application lightly. I sort of value my time. I'm only semi-retired, but when I take on a job or take on a task, I take it on wholeheartedly, and I do it with all of my energy, everything that I can do. So I had to give this some long thought. I first saw the notice that Jack Tibbetts had resigned, and just sort of mentioned it in passing to some friends, like, maybe that's something I should do. And the response I got from friends and neighbors was so overwhelming, telling me that I should do it, that I decided to put my application in, and now here I am. What I would like you to know about me is that I don't undertake anything lightly. I've spent a lifetime as first a trial lawyer for 20 years, and then as a corporate general counsel lawyer. Presently, I work mostly with startups. And you can imagine the kind of problems that call to be resolved when you're working with a startup company, especially these days in the tech fields and with all the attendant problems that COVID has brought. So basically, my whole life has been about conflict resolution. I've been a mediator, a very successful one. And what I've learned in mediation is that you never form an opinion, you never make a recommendation until you've satisfied yourself that you understand the issues and that you've heard and understood the positions of the parties that you're trying to help. And that's a skill that I would bring to the council. With regard to my time availability, I certainly have the time. I can attend the 24th and 25th sessions, and I would make the council schedules a priority ahead of anything else should I be appointed. I don't have a present intention to run for the open seat in November. That could change if I really like what I'm doing, if I join you as a colleague, but I don't have a present intention. But that said, it would not be my intention, and I certainly would not be a placeholder. I would be an active, hardworking member of the council and give it all of the attention it deserves and all the work that it needs. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you so much, Christopher. Do you go by Chris or Christopher?
The only person who calls me Christopher is my wife when she's mad at me. So please call me Chris.
I get that one. We'll start all the way over on the right with Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chris, for being here this evening.
Happy to be here.
Our city's charter is being reviewed currently by the Charter Review Committee. The Charter Review Committee's recommendations could be considered some of the most important decisions facing this council this year. Are you familiar with the committee's endeavor and responsibilities?
I'm familiar with the charter provision that requires that the charter be reviewed every 10 years. I'm familiar with the 21 people, I think, that are on the committee. I know several of the names, and I know what they're charged with doing. It's much like a mini constitutional convention where you revisit and try to see what things are working, what things aren't, and how governance could be done better.
Are you familiar with the various issues that they are deliberating on currently?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you familiar with the issues that they're deliberating?
Not specifically. I know the general categories that they're charged with deliberating on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Sweato?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Chris, for participating in this. And I totally resonate with Tom or Thomas. I'm with you on that one, so I appreciate it, Chris. So I saw in your application, you talked about maintaining the vitality of downtown as a key priority. So from your observation of what this council has done downtown and previous councils, what have we gotten right and what areas do need more focus in our downtown area for its vitality?
Well, I do think that the decision to reunite Courthouse Square was great. When I first came to Santa Rosa, not to live, but first encountered Santa Rosa, the old courthouse was still in the middle of the square. And to have and then when the courthouse was removed and they went, Santa Rosa Avenue, Mendocino went through, the traffic basically bypassed a lot of the downtown. So I thought it was a very good thing to do, and I'm very happy that was done. In fact, I would like to see more done when thinking about the proposal to make a more pedestrian-friendly way from the downtown to Railroad Square for the same reason, because I hate to see the town bifurcated. And what I've seen over the years is it's really an interesting phenomenon that if you go a block off 4th Street, either direction, the downtown almost disappears. All the vitality is on 4th Street, and it always has been. And I'd like to see some innovative solutions to try to draw that in. Some of the ideas for high-density housing, the new hotel that's come in, all of those things are really great for revitalizing the downtown. So I think those are that. I think a lot of the merchants have complained about the parking situations where the meters, like in Healdsburg, when you have 3-hour parking, and that's it, and you don't pay a meter. I think there's some issues in parking that could be addressed. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think that's an issue that I think a lot of the merchants downtown are concerned with.
And I also noticed that in your application, you mentioned you volunteered some time out at the Palms. So I'm interested in your thoughts about since the Palms is not within the jurisdictional limits of the city of Santa Rosa, could that be replicated here in the city, and how would we go about doing that?
Well, I think it could, because I got involved because my wife is a member of Congregation Beth Ami, and their social action committee is actually the group that does that work, working with Catholic charities to cook and serve meals there. During COVID, we haven't been serving the meals. We've just been cooking them, preparing them, delivering them, because they didn't want us to actually interact and serve the meals. But it's a very simple solution. It involves volunteers, and there are plenty of those. It involves addressing small, discrete groups, and it involves just a lot of care and compassion toward the people that need those services. So I think it's very easily replicated just about anywhere you want to do it.
Do you have suggestions as to where we would do it in Santa Rosa?
It occurred to me when I saw that the Gold Coin Motel was sold and there was going to be some development there, that would be an ideal location for something like that. One of the things that makes the Palms easy to do is that there are already residents there. They have, I believe, an AA counseling group there that's part of the situation, and a management that controls who comes in and who doesn't. So to the extent you could have that sort of a discrete situation, I think that would help. I'm not sure where that would work in Santa Rosa, but I'm sure with some diligence it could be found.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fleming?
Mr. Miller, or Chris, since nobody here is angry at you, thank you so much for coming in today. My question for you is similar to ones that I've asked previous applicants, which is, what is your approach or your philosophy of governance?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
How would you approach, intellectually, philosophically, how would you approach this job if appointed?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I would approach that the same way I do everything else. The most important thing in any kind of situation is to be aware and listen to what people are telling you, to not form opinions until you've done as much as you can and as much diligence that you can put into the situation to understand the facts. And collegiality is just the watchword. That's what it has to be, that, because you can't ever accomplish anything if you do or say something that gets somebody's back up and creates a hostile situation between you. So my approach has always been one of listening. That's always the first step. If I don't understand something, I ask questions until I do. If there's nobody that is available to answer my questions in my immediate surroundings, I go find someone who knows and ask that question and find out. But it's information gathering, it's collegiality, and it's being open to listen to different points of view.
So how then would you approach a difficult land use question? And I'll give you an example that came in front of the council in the last year. We had to decide whether or not we wanted to extend eviction moratorium protections. Are you familiar with what eviction moratorium? This is not a trick question. I'll just tell you it if you don't know. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing. I also wear hearing aids, and these masks are terrible.
Let me speak up a little bit. Is this better?
Yeah, much. Thank you.
Excellent. So eviction moratorium, we were asked whether or not we were going to extend an eviction moratorium. Are you familiar with what that means?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So in this situation, you have people who are fairly vulnerable, but you also have on one side low-income people in many cases, but not all cases. People who are just trying to make it through in most cases, but not all cases. People who are well-intentioned in most cases, but not all cases. And then on the other side, you have the property rights of landowners and their needs to pay their bills, pay their mortgages, and in general, they have more resources, but not in all cases. So it's not black or white, but at the end of the day, we have to make a decision that prioritizes one group or another. And we do our best to increase the pot and not have it be a zero-sum game, but sometimes it is. So I'm wondering, listening is great, collegiality is great. We see that in you, and we work really hard toward that. But when it's not always possible to just balance things out, how might you approach a situation like that?
Well, I think you have to, I don't think approaching any problem is different from the way you approach any other problem. That just happens to be a particularly emotionally charged problem and a particularly difficult problem to deal with. But I couldn't sit here today and make a recommendation to you because I don't know enough about what is available, what tax funds could be available to assist landlords or to assist tenants, whether it would make sense to put a time limit on how long the eviction moratorium would last in order to help people find alternative housing. There are just so many factors that go into a decision like that I'd really need a lot more information in order to answer that question cogently.
I appreciate your responses. Thank you for identifying all those factors.
Thanks.
Councilmember Rogers.
Hi, and thank you for being here. So my question is around DEI, and more specifically around equity and things being equitable. And we know that things are not always equitable, but you having a background or being in law, we know that things are not always equitable. So can you give me a situation in which you felt like you were working on something or you observed a situation that you felt was not equitable, and what did you do or what didn't you do and why?
Well, a really quick short answer to that is we raised 5 children. So you're always dealing with what's equitable in that kind of a situation because there's always somebody claiming it's not fair. But on a broader level, you know, I've had this discussion many times. I used to teach many years ago a course in philosophy and law at Sonoma State. And there's always a disconnect because people equate equity with justice, and they're not the same. Justice is the application of the law that results in a just result under the law. Equity doesn't always mean that you got a just result. Conversely, getting a just result doesn't mean you've done equity. Equity, I think, really falls more into the realm of fairness. And so you have to see whether or not what you have done or what you are proposing to do is as fair to the parties as you can make it be. And I think that's the best way I can answer that question.
Quick follow-up question. And it probably is not a trick question, but I need to ask anyway. So a guy's on trial, but and he sits on trial, but because he cannot afford a doctor, he can't afford a doctor to come testify for him, to testify for his mental illness, right? Is that?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part of your question.
There's a gentleman I'm giving you an example. I just want to know which one this is for you. There's a gentleman that's on trial, but he cannot afford a doctor to come testify to state whether or not he has the mental illness. Does that have to do with, and so he loses the trial because he can't get the doctor to come, he can't afford the doctor to come testify. So does that have to do with justice or equity?
I think it's a combination of both, actually, because ideally the law would provide that if you were an indigent defendant, and I've not done that kind of law, so I'm assuming that in many cases, just as a person is entitled to a public defender if he can't afford a lawyer, that the public defender's office also has people they can call on as experts who are compensated by the public defender's office. Everyone, no matter what their status, should be entitled to all the means to achieve a fair trial. And if in that instance that you set forth, if having a fair trial, a major component of that is the question of a person's mental status, then fairness requires that the state who is putting him on trial afford him the ability to make that determination.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And just so you know, they're not. So, but thank you for your answer.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Sir, thank you for being here tonight. In the 45 years as a Santa Rosa resident, actually since you came to work to Santa Rosa, what has been your experience in regards to the underserved? Have you been able to identify such a group? And if so, how can you, as a policymaker or as a city council member, help represent that group?
Well, I think we all know, those of us who've been around the city for a while know that the character and nature of the city has changed quite a bit in the last 45 years. Because it was a much smaller city then, we had a much less of a population of the underserved and the unserved. As the city has grown, as the population has increased, as the cost of living has arisen, as the cost of housing has risen, there's a corresponding increase in the unserved and underserved. So there have been a corresponding increase in the outreach programs that have been established to take care of those. I think that again, I don't have the knowledge base to give you a definitive answer, but I would think that getting more citizen involvement to form more outreach services, bringing in more organizations like Catholic Charities and the others that do this work, and encouraging and help to perhaps even subsidize it would help. Just having some community outreach workers to go out and find out what really is the problem that is causing these people to be held back, whether it's economic, whether it's health issues, whether it's a loss of a job, whether that loss of a job is temporary or permanent. And there are so many factors that there's no one cure. It has to be incremental.
Is there a method where you might use to define what is an underserved population and which is not underserved?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have a method to determine what group is underserved and which one isn't? And if so, how would you make that determination?
Well, again, I think even the term underserved is pretty all-inclusive. So I don't think there is any one-size-fits-all. I think you need to determine how people are underserved or not served and address specific needs with specific solutions. And I know that's a very vague answer, but unless you have a specific community that we're talking about or a specific group of people, it's hard to say what solution would best apply to them.
Thank you, sir.
So recently, the City Council raised our reserve policy from 15% of general fund to 17% of general fund. How would you go about deciding if that's adequate? What resources would you have sought to see? And are there any other types of budget parameters or budget conditions that you'd be looking for coming in as a council member to determine the fiscal health of the city?
So just to clarify, when you say reserve policy, are you talking about an insurance reserve against liability or for some other reason?
It's call it an overrun, a contingency fund.
Oh, contingency fund. When in my mind, when I hear somebody who has a reserve, I think about a reserve against litigation costs and expenses. Is that a part of it as well?
Well, yeah, the city attorney does a pretty good job of keeping us out of trouble, but yes, sometimes we have to ask her for money to defend ourselves.
Well, again, I hate to dance around and be vague about this, but it's kind of a hard question to answer unless I know what the actual specific issues are that might draw down upon that reserve. Clearly, if you've made a determination to increase the reserve, I'm assuming that the council, as it generally does, did its due diligence to determine what factors could cause it to count and to draw down on that reserve and made the appropriate decision. So I think it's something you just have to look at on an ongoing basis.
So one of the things that is going to be the biggest long-term impact of whoever gets appointed to this position is going to be the budget in June. How will you approach that, given that you have not gone through an election to hear from the community that you represent about what their priorities are?
I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Given that you are up for an appointment, not an election, you haven't gone through an elective process where you've talked with the community you'll represent about what their priorities are or how they would like to see the budget crafted. How will you pull in that input in time for our budget discussions later this year?
Oh, well, I would act as though I were running. I would talk to people in the community. I would hold coffee sessions. I would reach out by email. I would go to the Oakmont Community Center. I would talk to my neighbors. I would talk to all of the people who live in the district to see what's important to them, because that's what my job would be.
And on a related note, there's a time equals money, as we know, particularly when it comes to housing development. How will you balance the need for community input on projects versus getting projects off the ground faster?
Well, I think in a way it would be a process that would be almost like you conduct the meetings here, where you have a specific time for public comment. So for any proposed project, there would be a period of time where there would be public comment that would be encouraged. I would go to the people of the district in District 3 to see what their issues were, but let them know that at some point that comment is closed and a decision has to be made. Because, as you well know, I'm sure, you can't let these things drag on forever. Some decision has to be made, and you do your best to gather all the information you can from the public because that's who we serve. But at some point, all of that information has to be put together and a decision made. So I think just a time limit on that would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions from council? All right, I'll give it right back to you. If you want to do a closing, anything that we missed, anything that you wanted to highlight, the floor is yours.
Well, there's not really anything important other than to say that I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today, to have an opportunity to join you on the council and work for the benefit of the city. If you did choose me to join you as a member of the council, I can assure you that I would give you my all. I can assure you that I would do all the due diligence necessary to make a proper decision. I can assure you that I think, as my friend Jim said, you'd have a good time with me. And I'd love to do it.
All right, thank you so much. All right, council, let's move into our final applicant of the night. It's Michael Stanford. Michael, if you want to come on down and take the center seat. All right, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Council. I come from a low-income household. I moved to Rincon Valley, where I fell in love with this community and this city. For the past 10 years, I've worked for Sonoma County Regional Parks, where I get to put into practice my education in natural resource management and commitment to community service. Service is what I do. It's what my adult life has been. I've been involved in my union since day one. I've been a voice for the per diem employees. I've worked to negotiate 2 contracts and sustainable COLAs. I have also worked on equity projects such as paid parental leave at the county to ensure that those who live here can raise a family here. I'm also involved in Lions Club, that is, where I serve as club president, and in church as well, where I am involved in helping to feed 65 families, as well as managing the budget as the chair of the finance committee. I also co-founded the Sonoma County Tenants Union to help educate our tenants here in Sonoma County and in Santa Rosa. Income inequality and climate hardening are 2 topics that most address this city and this community. I'm a firm believer in participatory democracy. I believe in civic engagement is the key to saving democracy, especially in these dark times. I'm a team player and consensus builder and leader. That's how I like to govern in my committees and how I like to live my life as well. I have the time to serve on Tuesdays, to attend council meetings. I also have the time to attend goal-setting session on the 24th and 25th of this month. I have the time to serve on subcommittees, and I look forward to serving on those as well. I would like to thank you all, our city manager and city attorney, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'll start to my left with Councilmember Rogers.
Hi, Hi, Michael. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm going to stay with the same track that I've asked other applicants, and it's about the DEI. And you having a background with parks specifically. I have a passion with parks, probably because everyone can utilize parks. Can you give me an example of equity where you felt like maybe you had to stand up for something, or where equity was not, things were not equitable within maybe a department or a situation, and you had to stand up, or you maybe wanted to stand up but you couldn't, and why that was?
Great question. So part of what I do and why I got involved in the union is because I want to be and have been the voice of our per diem employees at the county, Extra Help, who have been overly used and used outside of the civil service rules. So I have, that's why I got involved first with Students Council and then became a chapter officer and a negotiating team member. I then helped to get Measure M passed, the Parks for All campaign, so that we could provide funding for moving Extra Help into permanent positions. And that resulted in the 2019-2020 budget, an increase of about 24 new positions, 12 for operations, where Extra Help had been used the most. So to me, that is an equity issue, because we are the lowest paid workers, and we deserve to be able to live in the community that we serve and provide for the taxpayers.
And do you have children?
I do not.
Okay. I believe I heard you say that you helped to advocate for the parental paid leave.
That is correct.
Okay. So why was that important for you to advocate for that? And are you hoping to have children one day? Is there what was your motive behind advocating for that?
So though I don't have children, I do hope to one day have children. But in the meantime, it's important that the friends and coworkers that I know and those in our community who do have children and would like to have children with their partner have the opportunity to do so. And paid parental leave allows them to be able to bond with their children, and that's very important in a child's development. And so I am a very empathetic and compassionate person, so I listened to my coworkers who really wanted this, and I worked to fight hard for it, and we were able to do that, to get eight weeks of paid parental leave with an additional 4 weeks that could be used using vacation savings plan for a couple weeks worth, and then additional leave such as vacation.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor. And welcome, Mr. Stanford. It's great to see you today. I'm going to ask you a few questions if my colleagues will allow. The first one is the one that I've asked most of the applicants around your philosophy of governance and how you manage situations where there's not often extra resources and you do have to pick between competing interests, often landowners versus tenants, and how you would manage the concerns actually of landlords, since you're very involved in the tenants union. When you get in these seats, it becomes very difficult to just see things from one way. So how might you manage your advocacy for tenants while also looking out for landlords who have to pay their mortgages as well?
No, great question. So part of the outreach that we've done is listening sessions with community members, as well as know your rights clinics, where landlords and tenants can come and learn about the law and their rights and what and their duties and responsibilities. So I believe that is a fair approach to this, to the issue at hand. And listening is very important. to be able to come to realization. And I know that that is a very difficult question, and I believe that you have also mentioned with regards to passing the eviction moratorium. And it is important, especially in a pandemic, that we do not increase our homelessness, which has already been as rampant as it has in the past. Although we are working towards that, we do not need to be able to increase that. And so I would have voted to increase or extend the eviction moratorium.
Excellent.
And looked at ways to mitigate, like a rental assistance program.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is a little bit different because it's a question about demographics. In that the district that you live in is, I believe it's our oldest district, and not by, the districts are all the same age, of course, but it is the district that has the largest percentage of senior citizens. It's also the most female district. And I'm wondering how you might relate to and involve these constituencies.
Yeah. So I would like to go on a listening tour. And I have a personal goal that if I were to be appointed, that I would try and knock on every door in the district within the first 3 months. Kind of going back to the previous question about my political philosophy, and I mentioned it in my introductions, I'm a firm believer in participatory democracy and civic engagement. And so doing this by knocking on doors, introducing myself, listening to the stories that people have to tell, I can educate myself on how I can better represent my fellow neighbors and constituents.
Thank you for your thoughtful responses.
Councilmember Schwedel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Michael, for participating in this process with us. In your application, you talked about the big issue about climate change. And you talked about the city and the county and property owners need to work on climate hardening. What are we doing well in this area, and what do you mean by climate hardening, and what do we need to do better?
Yeah, thank you. So after the glass fire hit, I had it was really impactful to me because my friend's family, Liz and Andy Adams, they lost their house, their dream home on Los Alamos Road. It was in the newspaper. You may have seen it. To have seen that property that I had explored all throughout my childhood and teenage years and such fond memories of completely reduced to rubble was very emotional for me. So it's important that we focus on our vegetation management and having firsthand knowledge of how to actually do that. I think that the skills that I learned in the vegetation management that I've done with regional parks that I can bring to the council. I also believe that with the American Recovery Plan Act funds and the PG&E settlement funds, as well as additional funds from the federal government, that we are, as a council, and you all have done a great job on this, are moving us in the right direction to be able to protect our vulnerable homes and communities, especially District 3, which has been hit by 2 massive firestorms. So I believe that we are on the right track. But that work also needs to be done in an equitable way, that the workers who do the work are hired locally, paid a living wage, and can eventually work towards retiring in this community that they serve.
And so when you talk about climate hardening, the big question is who's going to pay for it? What are your thoughts on that?
Again, as I had mentioned, the American Recovery Plan Act funds, the PG&E settlement funds, and available mitigation funds coming from the federal government. I believe that county-wide, we received about $57 million from the state and the federal government to go towards wildfire reduction programs, such as fuel reduction, which would be the large part of vegetation management.
So I know this council has had plenty of public hearings about the use of those funds, both PG&E and the ARPA. Are you supportive of the efforts that the city has been doing, or do you think we should be spending it some other direction?
I'm very supportive of what the city has done. And so I look forward to working with you all if I were to be appointed to see that through, as well as using my connections that I've learned, I've made at the county as well, so that we can cooperatively work together as the county and the city, as well as our state partners and our private landowners as well, because this is going to take all of us together, working together to be able to protect our community from future disasters. And hopefully we won't have another one, but yeah.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for being here this evening, Michael. Appreciate it. I'll ask you the same question I've asked the other applicants. And our city's charter is being reviewed by our Charter Review Committee as we speak. The Charter Review Committee's recommendations could be considered some of the most important decisions facing this council this year. Are you familiar with the committee's endeavor and responsibilities?
I am somewhat familiar with its duties, responsibilities, but in a more general sense.
Once the recommendations of the committee are received by the council, in no particular order, what do you feel are the most important potential changes in the charter which might come before the voters this year?
One thing that I foresee would be a full-time paid council. I think it's important that the fifth largest city in Santa Rosa, it prepares itself for eventually hitting the 200,000 population mark. We know that Berkeley has already made this transition, and we are much larger than them. Having a full-time council will allow us to, will continue to allow our civic engagement with our constituents, but then also open up for more equitable candidates for public office, including the youth of our communities, such as myself and those younger than me.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, given the financial condition of the city and the potential costs of 7 individuals receiving considerable amounts of money for a full-time job, what programs or what departments might you consider reducing to help pay for those, the council's pay?
Well, first, I would like to listen to our constituents and find out what they feel works best for them, and is a for a salary. Then, obviously, we would have to bring it to the voters ultimately for their final approval. So once we get an idea of what a paid council would look like, then we'd have to make the hard decision of where do we find that money. And then that will be part of the presentation and goal to the voters and have them ultimately decide.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael, good to have you here, sir. What social issue are you most passionate about? And I do have 2 follow-up questions.
I would say at this point in time is addressing the equity issue in our communities. We know that the life expectancy of our Latinx population, of our Pacific Islander and African American communities are far below our white communities here in Santa Rosa. We also know that the average income is lower as well, and so we need to work towards addressing these issues. And part of what I would like to do is to work with our excuse me. Great. A targeted investment in infrastructure so that we can work towards a greener, cleaner environment that puts more focus on those who have been hit hardest by the climate crisis that we have now faced ourselves into. And for city projects as well as future buildings to have a local hire ordinance so that those who work to construct the future of our city, that they live here and they earn their income here and they spend their money here, and we receive those tax revenue back to us. As well as an apprenticeship program and to coordinate with our local high schools. One thing that I would like to do, if appointed, would be to continue reaching out to our local school districts like Santa Rosa City Schools, Rincon Valley, and Bennett Valley school districts, since we have some overlap in, well, obviously in our jurisdictions, but and then one thing that I would like to do is build the community center. It's important, and I know this for myself, when I grew up along the river, the Hollandale Club, that was the community hangout. And so I know the importance of having a place that you can go and hang out with friends, see family, and have a great time, and also learn more about yourself in that process too. Yeah.
Considering the word equity as it is the issue that you're most passionate about, what would you say is the argument that critics make to support their position?
What do I think is the argument that critics make? That somehow there's not enough to go around. And I disagree with that. It's not a pie. We're not asking for more slice of the pie. We're asking for an equal slice.
Very well. And my last question, and I understand both sides of that coin, especially when I hear the argument. So with that in mind, what sacrifices would you be willing to make to strike a balance and move the issue forward? Or in this case, move equity or equitable solutions forward, if any?
The sacrifice I would personally make?
Yes.
Yeah.
In regards to your efforts to move equity forward in conversation and movements with and amongst and against the critics.
Well, I would like to sit down with them and listen to them. And I think that there might be something that is lost in translation. And show them around, have them meet the people who they may not have engaged with in the past, and have them come together and discuss the issue. One thing that I like to think about is that, on this issue is everybody in, nobody out. Let's all come together, talk about the issues, and seek that common ground together. And again, that's the consensus model to me. And so I would give my time and my energy and my drive and my passion to serve and achieve the goal of equity.
Now, when I asked the question originally about what social issue you were most passionate about, I did not know that your answer would be equity. So it's hard to say that I'd be willing, even for myself, make sacrifices in regards to my position in regards to equity. But are there any sacrifices of your goal that you'd be willing to make in order to achieve more equity, if not total equity?
It's a very good question.
And it's a difficult one because I have trouble with it as well, especially as a policymaker. I guess my question ultimately is, would you be willing to settle for less if you couldn't get all?
Something is better than none. And that's what I've learned in negotiations. You know, I put forward many proposals that never got approved, but as written. But certainly through conversations and back and forth, we were able to seek something that both parties could live with. And I think that would be something that I would bring to this council.
That's perfect. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your answers.
Thank you so much for answering the questions thoughtfully so far. I have two. First, one of the substantial conversations we've been having at the council level is about our long-term pension obligations. And in fact, we've discussed pension obligation bonds. What is your thought process around POBs and long-term sustainability strategies for the city?
Yes, so having looked at the budget, the unfunded liability is quite sizable. I believe it's expected to be close to $200 million over the next decade or so, and currently in the 21-22 budget, it's about $13.1 million of city funds going towards the unfunded liability. So I've been thinking about this. Obviously, the unfunded liability is revenue that we're not able to invest in our community, and so it needs to be addressed. I would look at a bond measure to do that, or another revenue stream as well. I think it's important that we begin working on the unfunded liability, as it will also be able to affect our ability to get additional bonds approved with lower interest rates. Most of our bonds currently on the books are in the AA to AA minus range. And so I have, on my time on council, I would work with you all so we can be able to formulate a way to be able to move that into a solid AA or into a AAA status, which will set us up for a better fiscal stance in the future should we have to increase bonds.
Okay. And then on the question of homelessness, how and when should the council and the city engage our homeless encampments?
I like that, again, communicating with our homeless residents and talking with them. Housing to me is a human right, and I don't think that the best way is to continually move people around from encampment to encampment. It's stressful. It's stressful enough to be an unsheltered individual. I think that how we should engage with our unsheltered individuals is to remember that they are human beings with dignity, and we need to treat them as such. I have worked on the Joe Dota Trail. My district for regional parks encompasses the Joe Dota Trail, and so I have talked with and worked with our unsheltered individuals that have found themselves there, as well as working with my rangers to be able to develop personal but yet professional interactions and mutual respect.
So to dig in just a little bit, for folks who are service resistant, should they be allowed to stay where they're at?
I believe so, yes. But continuing to engage with them and working with them, because I do believe that eventually we will be able to get them in the services.
Great, thank you. Councilor, are there any other questions for Michael? All right, if you want to do your closing.
Yep. I'm driven by my faith to do good works. I have a 10-year record of public service and a team player who leads by consensus. I will run for election if appointed. So far throughout this process, I have been endorsed by Jackie Elward, Mayor of Roanoke Park, Ever Flores, Santa Rosa City School Board, Marty Bennett, labor activist and co-founder of North Bay Jobs with Justice, Carla Rodriguez, Deputy District Attorney, Sonny Galbraith, educator and environmentalist, Maya Kosla, biologist and environmentalist, and Emmett Hopkins, environmentalist. I have also been endorsed by my friends and neighbors who live in Rincon Valley. My friend Molly, who lives in the middle of the district. My mom's boyfriend, who lives in Oakmont. Ivan, who's a small businessman who does gardening, who had to make a tough decision to spend $200 to fix one of his leaf blowers that he needs so that he can continue to make money. And Jeremiah, who went out on his own last year to create a small business and now has 5 employees. I also have the endorsement of my friend and neighbor, Janae, excuse me. Her daughter is Janaya, who's a single mom of color who hasn't worked since the beginning of the pandemic. Her number one priority is childcare. So I'd like to thank you all for appropriating $2.9 million for childcare during this pandemic for the ARPA funds. And on behalf of all of them and myself, I want to say thank you for all the work that you all have done, our city manager has done, and our city attorney has done. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate the interest and for coming here and answering questions for us. We have finished our interviews, so I want to thank everybody who's still here. We will now go to public comment on the interviews. And so we'll take it in 2 different stages. We'll have both the live public comment in the chamber, which I'll go to first, and then we'll do public comment for folks on Zoom. So if you're interested in providing comment in the chamber, we've got the podium up at the top. Make sure that you speak clearly into the microphone, identify yourself for the record, then you'll have 3 minutes to comment specifically on these interviews. If you are interested in providing comment on Zoom, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature, and we will start to queue folks up.
Thank you. Yes. Can I start?
And I will also say, while I appreciate there are a number of candidates here, candidates do not get to speak in public comment because they were interviewed.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
And go ahead and take it away.
Yes, can I start? Hi. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Rogers and Vice Mayor Alvarez, City Council and staff. And I also want to thank the kind words from Councilman Sawyer earlier about my family. I am Stephanie Nacuzzi. I am the mother of Melanie. I'm speaking on behalf of our family. We do support Melanie for the City Council position, and we wanted to make that clear. The family does, of course, support her. I served with the city on the Cultural Heritage Board and Art in Public Places for around 10 years. And when I became aware that Jack Tibbetts was resigning, my daughter Melanie has the natural qualities to be an excellent council person from what I saw when I served with the city. Just a little bit about the background. My husband and I met in New York City. He had left Lebanon due to the Civil War. He's a survivor of bomb. And when we met in New York, he had an accent and never wore a coat. And this was odd in the winter, but it turns out he didn't have money to buy a coat. So he's become a success story. He's passed on to the family the value of appreciating the privilege and hard work and collaboration. The Civil War has been a valuable lesson for the whole family. Melanie embodies these qualities. I hope that this came across in her presentation. She's a determined person. She is a very smart person. Beyond the fact that it's not easy to get into Stanford, she has qualities of being able to work with people and be able to mediate and use her knowledge to learn very quickly what issues are and get up to speed. She has technical skills. She's an engineer. I've always thought of her as more of a people person, but she chose to go into engineering. These are skills that she could bring to the council on issues of like bike pedestrian bridges over 101 or housing, and she has technical knowledge. So I'm running out of time here, but my daughter would be an excellent addition to the council. Thank you for this interview process. She doesn't have a particular agenda other than wanting to serve the community, which she can do well. And this is an opportunity to serve for a year before she goes back into the engineering workforce. So I hope you give her this opportunity, and I think you would all very much enjoy working with her. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Always glad to have a proud mom here. Is there anyone else in the chamber who would like to provide comment? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and move to our Zoom. We have Jana, followed by Mateo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jana Blunt, and I work for the County of Sonoma. I'm a colleague of Michael Stanford, and I want to speak in support of Michael Stanford as a candidate. Up until hearing Michael Stanford speak, what I heard this afternoon was nothing short of alarming. Candidates who are so dissociated from the real world, disillusioned from their own privilege, and possessing negligible solidarity with the backbone of our community, our working class. One candidate actually claimed with a straight face that we're experiencing a labor shortage. That's some dangerous small business tyrant mentality. Anyone out here on the ground knows all too well there's no labor shortage. There is, however, a living wage shortage, and proponents of capitalism so easily forego their beloved supply and demand rhetoric when it has to do with paying a living wage. We also had a doctor speak today who actually comfortably announced that he feels that our pandemic mandates aren't rooted in sufficient science, and further would recuse himself from discussions of mandates because of his, quote, personal beliefs. Yet another candidate claimed that she would be the right pick because she's 31, like Jack Tibbetts, will not run for re-election, and has openly claimed to have no agenda. Lastly, a candidate who couldn't correctly define the word equity in the year 2022. Thankfully, you have before you a candidate who has spent more time connecting with and advocating for our community his entire adult life. He's the most civically engaged individual before you today. He even has the endorsement of the North Bay Labor Council, a gigantic group of trade, medical, and public organizations who come together to support our community's working class. Michael Stanford was single-handedly responsible for securing the county's extra help employees received the same amount of hazard pay as permanent employees. He regularly advocates for causes that don't immediately benefit him. He's the candidate before you today with the knowledge, concrete policy goals, and the principles that our community deserves. He was the only candidate whose answers included facts, figures, substance, plans, and concrete goals. Bottom line, he's better informed on the issues you face than the rest of the candidates combined. You've got a choice tonight between a group of wealthy, disillusioned, and half-hearted, or a young man with the passion, experience, commitment, and integrity to take this appointment seriously. You will feel the effects of his effort, I know from experience. You'll see the fruits of his labor. He's an exemplary human being and a gift to this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. We'll go to Clark, followed by Mary.
Hello. I would like to show my support for Michael Stanford. In all my years of knowing him, he has always been a compassionate and thoughtful individual. And what he has done for this county already would definitely qualify him, I believe, for this position. And I hope that you will give him the chance to prove that to you again, as he already has. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark. Mary, followed by Julia.
Hi, thank you. This is Mary Sandberg, and I'm a resident of Santa Rosa. I want to thank the council for this engagement, for the opportunity to meet these candidates. I want to thank the candidates too, who took the time. It's not an easy thing to come before a board and answer these questions. I do think that what we saw tonight, though, is a clear differentiation between those who have applied and shown interest. I do think that it's one thing to see an opportunity come up and throw your hat in and say, what the heck, I'll give it a whirl. And it's another thing to bring in the depth of knowledge and engagement that someone like Michael Stanford showed tonight. This is not a passing interest. This is not an awareness of City Council that has come up because an opportunity presented itself. This is how engaged Michael has been with city issues for years and years. And he showed that tonight. And I think what you would find in Michael is exactly what you saw here tonight. Someone who knows and is aware of the depth of the issues and challenges facing the city. Someone who can come in and work with you as colleagues and collaborators to face these serious issues and to do so quickly. It will not take Michael long to get more knowledgeable and aware of the issues facing the city. He will go out there and beat the pavement and knock on doors and put together listening sessions. And he will know more than he already does about the awareness of what is most interest to his constituents, but also what's of interest to the entire city. Michael, working with the parks and his natural resources background, working with the unsheltered, working at the county with his work on negotiations and fighting for wages, living wages, paid sick time, safety issues throughout the COVID pandemic. I think that you have seen really a caliber of applicant here that far outshines. And no offense to the other applicants, I give them great props for coming forward, but I just do think that the depth of knowledge and awareness and ability there was a difference. And I think that Michael has shown that he wants to come in, understand the issues, collaborate with you as a group, and continue the good work of the City Council. So I am encouraging you to support Michael Stanford for this appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. We'll go to Julia, followed by Amos.
Hi, my name is Julia Repkin. Live just outside Santa Rosa city limits in the unincorporated area, Bennett Valley. But I work for the county, and so I'm a colleague of Michael's and a union colleague, a fellow steward. And Michael's the chair of our Committee on Political Education, actually, for the union. I'm not sure he said that in his statement. And so we've worked closely on that committee for a few years now. And he constantly astounds me, like he did tonight, on his breadth of knowledge of local issues, state issues, national issues. He's tremendously dedicated to fighting, whether it be on equity issues or social justice or environmental issues, housing. He's passionate and knowledgeable in the sense that he does his research, he remembers, really the other piece I wanted to mention is that in his work at the county and in the union, it's not about, I'm not very articulate tonight. His work is so much about uplifting others. I really think that's kind of the bottom line. And so even, in the campaign around fighting for hazard pay for county employees and for people that are low paid, extra help staff, he got his colleagues to speak up. He worked to organize them over a long period of time and helped develop their confidence to speak up alongside him. And that's a true leader to me. He's not someone that's interested in, kudos or, personal congratulations. He is truly fighting for his friends and neighbors and community. And what more could we want in a council member? So I strongly endorse Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I'll go to Amos, followed by phone number ending in 9140.
Yeah, hi. I'm Amos Eaton, and I'm a resident of city of Santa Rosa. I've known Michael for many years. I know that he takes the time to research the issues before he takes a position. I think that came through very clearly tonight. And I also know that he's willing to listen and learn from the people around him, his peers, the community, whatever the group is that he's working with. He wants to hear them. I know that he lives and works the values he espoused tonight. He's got a deep belief in democracy, a willingness to listen, to learn. And I really do think those are the things that make him the best candidate to join an already seated city council. You know, you guys are already working together. You already have a team, and now you're bringing in a new individual. And I think Michael's commitment is there. I'd ask you to support his candidacy. Thank you.
We've got resident 9140, followed by Mateo.
Okay, it says I'm unmuted, so hopefully you can hear me. This is Jack Buckhorn. I'm the executive director of the North Bay Labor Council. I am also a resident and voter in the 3rd District, and I'm calling in full support of Michael Stanford for this appointment. I think it's been very clearly shown tonight that Michael has command of many of the policies that are facing the 3rd District and the entire city of Santa Rosa. Most importantly, he understands how important it is to talk to the residents, to get feedback, to be transparent, to be a good listener, to have empathy, to care about the climate. All these things came through very clearly to me. I especially appreciate the fact that he's willing to walk our neighborhoods and actually talk to us about what's important. I've also been evacuated 2 times because of wildfires, and I know how much improvement that still needs to be made when we have to evacuate on emergencies like we have. There is room for work with regard to evacuation routes and timing and how we do that in a better way. So I fully endorse Michael both personally and as the executive director of the North Bay Labor Council, and I'd appreciate your support for him this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. We'll go to Mateo.
Hi. Thank you, Council, for your time tonight. I would like to start out by saying that I did not formally prepare a statement in advance, so I apologize for my lack of articulation. I am currently in high school, so I am not an adult member of society quite yet, and I had not planned to make public comment, but after listening to many of the speeches, I decided that there were too many pressing issues to simply say nothing. I heard a total of 2 candidates that did not have a complete disassociation with reality tonight. I heard the word equity used most likely over 100 times without a single real definition, a concrete definition being given. In other words, just an empty word that simply means nothing. I still have not figured out for myself what changes from equity to equality. I'm not sure why we've transitioned away from the term equality. You may consider me a little bit behind on times, but I just think words should have actual definitions. As for the candidates themselves, I heard, as I said, 2 candidates without a complete disassociation with reality. I heard, first of all, who's been called out a few times, Michael Stanford came forward with actual statements of facts and actual plans as opposed to simply empty words. And the candidate who I'd like to comment a little bit more on, who has not been commented on yet, was Dr. James Devore, whose comments on COVID-19 and mandates actually meant something to me. As someone who's currently in high school, as a youth of society, I believe that it is time to go back to normal. And this is not just my belief. This is a belief that's shared by a large portion of the scientific community who has been, frankly, silenced. You can't follow the science when you silence half of the science. It simply doesn't work. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mateo. That's the last comment that I see on Zoom, so I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back. Madam City Clerk, can you walk through what the process is for council from here on out?
Yes, Mayor. The council has 3 ballots in front of them, one for the first round of voting, and then on the second sheet is for round 2 and round 3. In the first round of voting, you will vote for 3 candidates. I will take your ballots and read them into the record, and those candidates that have 1 or less votes will be eliminated. In the second round, council will vote for 2 members from the candidates who have not been eliminated, and as such, we will go down to a final round if needed.
Okay. Madam City Attorney, would it be appropriate to open it up for discussion amongst the council, or does the charter say we go to a vote?
No, you may have discussion if you would like.
Okay. I'll see if there's any comments or discussion from council. Okay. I just want to express again my gratitude to all of the candidates who did apply, who do want to make a difference in their community. Public service is a tough job, and there's no more important time to do it than when people need help. And that certainly has been the case here in Santa Rosa. I'll say for me tonight, I'm looking for somebody who can step in and contribute and also understand that there is an election coming in a year. And I would encourage anybody who is interested, candidate tonight or not, who thinks that they have a vision for Santa Rosa to sell to the public and to get buy-in from the district, to please run in November. Even if you're not selected tonight. I think we've heard a lot of well-intentioned, smart, and very, very passionate people tonight. And so I think District 3 will be well represented for the next year and through the election. With that, we'll go ahead and move towards our voting. So if council wants to fill out your first ballot, and I think the city clerk will come and take them.
Yes, and please put your name at the top of the ballot for me too, please. Okay, I will start from this end of the dais where I collected the ballots, starting with Councilmember Sawyer. There's 1 vote for Mr. Devore, 1 vote for Ms. McDonald, and 1 vote for Ms. Nacuzzi. Councilmember Schwedhelm, 1 vote for Mr. Devore, 1 vote for Ms. McDonald, and 1 vote for Mr. Miller. Vice Mayor Alvarez, 1 vote for Mr. Stanford, 1 vote for Ms. McDonald, and 1 vote for Mr. Devore. For Mayor Rogers, we have 1 vote for Ms. McDonald, 1 vote for Mr. Devore, and 1 vote for Mr. Stanford. From Councilmember Fleming, we have 1 vote for Ms. McDonald, 1 vote for Mr. Devore, and 1 vote for Mr. Stanford. And for Councilmember Rogers, we have 1 vote for Mr. Stanford, 1 vote for Ms. McDonald, and 1 vote for Mr. Devore. So by that tally, the candidates that are eliminated are Mr. Miller, Ms. Nacuzzi, and Mr. Shantz. So your next round of voting will be you'll vote for 2 candidates, and those will be from Mr. Devore, Ms. McDonald, and Mr. Stanford.
And as a point of clarification, Madam Clerk, we have rounds 2 and round 3 on the same sheet. Should council just split that in 2 and hand you 1 at a time?
Madam City Attorney, can they do that? The reason it's on 2 sheets is to save on paper. You have 2 copies of the same sheet, 1 for round 2 and 1 for round 3.
No, it has round 2 and round 3 on the same sheet.
No, yes,
Oh, we have it. I only have 1 of them. We'll figure it out. All right, thank you.
Okay, for round 2, we have 1 vote for Mr. Devore from Councilmember Sawyer and 1 vote for Ms. McDonald. From Councilmember Schwedhelm, we have 1 vote for Mr. Devore and 1 vote for Ms. McDonald. From Vice Mayor Alvarez, we have 1 vote for Mr. Stanford and 1 vote for Ms. McDonald. For Mayor Rogers, we have 1 vote for Ms. McDonald and 1 vote for Mr. Stanford. Councilmember Fleming, we have 1 vote for Ms. McDonald and 1 vote for Mr. Stanford. And for Councilmember Rogers, we have 1 vote for Mr. Stanford and 1 vote for Ms. McDonald. So with that total, Mr. Devore received 2 votes, Ms. McDonald received 6 votes, and Mr. Stanford received 4 votes. So we can do the last round of voting, and you vote for 1 candidate. Okay, in the final round of voting, Councilmember Sawyer voted for Mr. Devore. Councilmember Schwedhelm voted for Ms. McDonald. Vice Mayor Alvarez voted for Mr. Stanford. Mayor Rogers voted for Ms. McDonald. Councilmember Fleming voted for Ms. McDonald. And Councilmember Rogers voted for Mr. Stanford. So by that tally, Mr. Devore received 1 vote, Ms. McDonald received 3 votes, and Mr. Stanford received 2 votes. So the majority of votes was Ms.
Well, Madam Clerk, as a point of clarification, I think Mr. Devore was eliminated in round 2, so I think Councilmember Sawyer needs to select between the 2 remaining candidates.
Thank you.
Actually,
I'm sorry, I realize that as well. I mean, it wasn't indicated, but I realized that I erred on that one due to the voting, and I would be switching my vote to Ms. McDonald.
and just to clarify, the rules are that anyone receiving 1 vote or fewer, and Mr. Devore in round 2 did receive 2, but we would have just simply done the final vote again. So assuming that everyone else would be keeping with their original vote in round 3.
I think my preference, Madam City Attorney, if the rule is 1 or fewer being eliminated, with that clarification that
Yes.
there's still 3 candidates remaining, let's
Yes.
take another vote from the council
On the
before we
final
proceed.
round 3.
Yeah, Councilmember Schwedhelm.
For clarification, again, I thought Mr. Devore was eliminated last round. So how many candidates are available to be voted for in this round?
I'm sorry, there are 3 that are still eligible because each one received more than 1 vote.
But each council member has 1 vote in this round
In
as
this
opposed to
final
2 in
round,
the previous.
yes.
Understood, thank you.
Yes. And just for clarification, it's Mr. Devore received 2 votes in the last round, Ms. McDonald received 6, and Mr. Stanford received 4. So those are the three that were left, so you will vote for 1 now.
So to make sure everybody's on the same page, we are going to re-vote round 3.
Thank you.
Everyone has 1 vote to be able to give. The 3 remaining candidates are Dr. Devore, Diana McDonald, and Michael Stanford. So everybody has 1 vote amongst those 3.
You can just use your Post-it notes to write the name, and I will collect the Post-it notes. Okay, Ms. McDonald received Councilmember Sawyer's vote. Mr. Devore received Councilmember Schwedhelm's vote. Vice Mayor Alvarez voted for Mr. Stanford. Mayor Rogers voted for Ms. McDonald. Councilmember Fleming voted for Ms. McDonald. And Councilmember Rogers voted for Mr. Stanford. By that tally, Ms. McDonald received 3 votes, Mr. Stanford received 2, and Mr. Devore received 1.
Having not, no applicant had received 4 or more votes in the final round, it now will bump to the provision in our policy that if a majority of the council cannot agree on the appointment of one of the applicants, the council may adopt such other procedures to fill the vacancy as it deems appropriate. So you may move forward. Options would include doing round 3 again, deciding that it will be, or you can take some other step. We will need to have 4 council members support an applicant in order for there to be a decision.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. And I think I speak on behalf of the entire council when I say perhaps this is an issue that the Charter Committee should discuss, because we've run into this a couple of times now, even in just my term.
Yes, and it is a matter also of our council policy, so both the charter and the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the public, where we sit right now, given the council's process that's built into the city charter, is that now it's up to the council to see if we can reach consensus. I'll see if there's any discussion or if there are any motions that folks would like to make on how we proceed or on who we appoint as our next council member. I'll come to the vice mayor and then I'll come back to Councilmember Fleming.
Just a suggestion on if one person has received 1 vote, even in the final round, is it possible for that name to be eliminated to recast our votes?
Yes, at this point, the council can decide the method of moving forward.
Councilmember Fleming?
One thing that caught me by surprise in the process is I had assumed that we would continue to go down with the rule that if a candidate or applicant gets 1 or fewer votes, then they would then drop off. It seems to me that the most natural approach here is then to have 1 more round of voting where Mr. Devore is eliminated, no, with much respect, and the council gets to choose 1 between the 2 remaining candidates. I'd like to put a motion on the table that that's how we proceed.
All right, that's a motion from Councilmember Fleming with a second from the vice mayor. We will have to take a vote on the process. And so the suggestion was, as the 2 highest scoring applicants in the final round, the council will choose between McDonald and Stanford with 1 vote from each council member. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alvarez?
Aye.
Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
That motion passes with 6 ayes.
Okay, so council will vote 1 more time. You each have 1 vote, and the 2 applicants remaining are McDonald and Stanford.
Councilmember Sawyer voted for Ms. McDonald. Councilmember Schwedhelm voted for Ms. McDonald. Councilmember Alvarez voted for Ms. McDonald. I'm sorry, that was Vice Mayor Alvarez voted for Ms. McDonald. Mayor Rogers voted for Ms. McDonald. Councilmember Fleming voted for Mr. Stanford. And Councilmember Rogers voted for Mr. Stanford. Ms. McDonald has received 4 votes. And Mr. Stanford has received 2.
Okay. So that means that Ms. McDonald will be joining the council as the new representative for District 3. Madam City Attorney, is there anything else on this item?
No, that sets the appointment, and the next step will be the swearing in, which can take place at any time.
Excellent.
And I am prepared to do that tonight if council so chooses, or we can do that at the meeting, at the next meeting.
Let's leave it up to the new council member. Would you like to do the swearing in tonight or at the next meeting?
Excellent.
All right. And again, I wanted to express a gratitude and thank all of the applicants. I really appreciate the interest in folks wanting to help out Santa Rosa. And with that, we'll bring up our newest council member.
There we go. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. So, I'll let you, yes.
Okay. I, Diana McDonald, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Welcome to the City Council. Okay, just need you to sign this.
All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, we will adjourn our special meeting.